Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Donald Trump addresses the World Economic Forum in Davos as he reiterates his plans for the golden age of America and calls the last administration inept. Tens of thousands are told to evacuate parts of LA County after a new wildfire blasts through mountainous areas 45 minutes from the city. The British teenager responsible for killing 3 schoolgirls in Southport is sentenced to life in prison. The judge said it's unlikely he'll ever be released. And Emilia Perez, Wicked and The Brutalist received the most nomination at this year's Academy Awards. To our top story, and in the last hour, Donald Trump has addressed the World Economic Forum in Davos. During his speech, he spoke about his historic week and blamed Joe Biden for losing control of inflation as well as the borders. Trump also explained his reasons for pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement and promised that America would be the best place to create jobs and also make products. Here's just some of what he had to say.
My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. We're bringing them down very substantially, even from the original Trump tax cuts. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt.
Let's get the latest from our Washington correspondent, Caroline Malone. Caroline, Donald Trump very critical of the last administration when it came to inflation and immigration, and he explained the reasons behind some of those executive orders this week. What were the main takeaways from his address in Davos?
So President Trump has talked about a lot of what he sees as the problems left from the last administration, President Biden, and how he has to fix all those issues, but also touted his own achievements only in the last few days since taking office just a few days ago, and all that his administration have achieved, particularly when it comes to taking action to send troops towards the border to try and start dealing with what he sees as a big illegal immigration crisis. Also, DOGE, the Department of Efficiency, talking about how important that will be to reduce government spending because the last administration, he says, greatly overspent and left them in a lot of debt with a lot of interest to pay. I think in particular, though, what's been interesting from what he said in Davos is this focus that he has put on energy. We know, of course, that Donald Trump has talked about allowing oil and gas to have a resurgence in the United States, to lift any kind of bans there have been on new oil and gas digs, particularly because of environmental reasons. And that was one of the focuses that he had in this talk today. He spoke in particular about letting the people buy the cars they want and use the liquid gold under their feet. He says the US has the largest oil and gas reserves and they're going to be able to use it. He said also that he wants oil and gas prices to be reduced. He called in particular to OPEC countries to consider that and the importance of that in helping to deal with not just the price of oil and gas and therefore inflation, but also its impact on world wars such as in Russia and Ukraine being top of his agenda. He also spoke about AI, the push from the United States to create more AI business, more cryptocurrency business, to have more energy to be able to source that business and the importance he sees of that being central to the US economy going forward, and mentioned some of the deals that have been done with a number of countries, companies over the last few days, whether it's SoftBank, or OpenAI, and the billions of dollars in deals that have been done to help in that cause.
Yes, definitely. Caroline, you mentioned it there earlier. He spoke about the immigration action at the US border. He said the mass deportation process had already started and he deployed US troops to assist with this. What more do you know?
Well, at the moment, there's a suggestion that something like up to 10,000 troops could be sent to the border regions, particularly with Mexico, to try and handle what the Donald Trump administration is trying to achieve in terms of numbers of deportations. We know that just in the last 24 hours, another 1,500 have been approved, so we haven't got up to that full number yet. But certainly putting it as a priority for the Department of Defense as well, for the Pentagon, to try and be on those borders in larger numbers. There's also been some suggestion that the customs enforcement groups will be involved in raids in different cities in the United States, ICE as they're known. But also, and we heard this from President Trump, particularly on his Fox News interview with Hannity just last night, that he may consider reducing funding for sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities are basically places that protect immigrants, and particularly concerning to President Trump is if they might get in the way of any of these kind of raids that are being carried out to find illegal immigrants and potentially deport them. So talking about withdrawing money from sanctuary cities, if that's a type of obstacle that they face.
And let's just go to something a little bit different, but still about the Trumps. And we must say congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Trump today. 20 years married. Was that the real reason he didn't go to Davos in person, do you think?
Well, he's certainly got a packed agenda from what we've seen from the White House poll today as well. So potentially quite a few events on his schedule, as well as spending time with his wife. But yes, I mean, we've seen photos released on this important anniversary of the two of them, particularly when they got married so many years ago. And also, of course, you know, she's been a highlight of a lot of the inauguration events, a lot of photos taken with fashionable outfits, her standing by Mr. Trump, and also their dance that they had at some of the numerous balls. So their relationship has featured somewhat, but I think also President Trump seems to have a very packed schedule when it comes to political and domestic events as well.
But he did manage to send her a nice message on social media. Caroline Malone in Washington, thank you so much for joining me. Now, Donald Trump also spoke about his conversation with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. During the phone call, the Crown Prince said that the kingdom was willing to invest $600 billion in the United States over the next 4 years. Trump told the Davos summit he would be asking him to increase this to $1 trillion. Al Arabiya's Washington correspondent Joseph Habush has more.
Ties between the United States and Saudi Arabia are off to a significantly better start than they were under the previous administration. This was evident during last night's call between President Donald Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, which was the U.S. president's first call with a foreign leader since taking office on Monday. The call last night was detailed in a statement put out by the Saudi press agency, which said that the Crown Prince expressed willingness to increase investment with the U.S. by $600 billion over the next 4 years, and potentially increasing that number. This is the second pledge from a Gulf country, the first of which was made by DEMAC CEO Sain Sajwani of the United Arab Emirates, to the tune of $20 billion for investments in data centers across the United States. That pledge was made before President Trump took office. Separately, and this hasn't been reported as much, MBS had a call last night with the top U.S. diplomat Marco Rubio, with the U.S. side putting out a readout of the call. The two discussed bilateral ties and what the State Department said is this time of momentous change. The secretary expressed Washington's ambition to increase bilateral ties with the kingdom and work on shared interest in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and elsewhere. Secretary Rubio also stressed the threat of Iran and its proxies, and he thanked Saudi Arabia for its role in promoting regional peace and stability.
Joseph Habush, our Washington correspondent for Al Arabiya News. Thank you. More than 31,000 Los Angeles residents have been evacuated as firefighters battle two new fast-moving blazes. The rapidly spreading fires threatening homes in a city still coming to terms with the loss of thousands of properties in the last few weeks. Nick Harper reports.
Another monster fire eating up California's hillsides. The Hughes fire has ravaged more than 10,000 acres, almost 40 square kilometres to the north of Los Angeles. 4,000 firefighters are working on the blaze, many going through the night. One silver lining, this latest flare-up is in the sparsely populated northern hills, away from busy communities.
We're not dealing with a large population and a large amount of residential homes, as we saw with those two fires. Out here, it's more sparsely populated. However, out here, we are dealing with high winds, which we also saw with the other fires.
By early Thursday US time, firefighters said the Hughes fire was only 14% contained. Strong winds are spreading the flames, but the weather is not as intense as 2 weeks ago, allowing aircraft to drop water and retardant on the affected areas.
We were able to put in tens of thousands of gallons of retardant on the south side of the fire because the fire was moving to the southwest. It was really the aircraft, in addition to all of those ground resources, which allowed us to get the upper hand.
Also threatened, the upmarket and densely populated Bel Air neighbourhood, in an area where real estate is valued in the tens of millions of dollars. The Palisades and Eaton fires from earlier this month are still burning, with firefighters managing to keep them largely contained. But people are still returning to count the cost of the destruction of entire neighborhoods.
So this was my house that was about to celebrate its 100th birthday, and it's in rubble. It was a stucco Spanish-style house, which I would have assumed was somewhat fire resistant. It's, hard stucco, but in fact, no, it did not fare very well.
President Donald Trump is due to travel to LA on Friday to survey the damage. The president has already blamed poor fire management in the Democrat-controlled state, fanning the flames of partisan politics in the opening days of his new administration. Nick Harper, Al Arabiya News.
Life in prison for Axel Rudakubana, the British 18-year-old who murdered 3 schoolgirls at a dance class in Southport. During the sentencing, the judge said Rudakubana was never likely to be released and would serve a minimum of 52 years in jail. Let's go to our correspondent in London now, Stuart Smith. Stuart, thank you for joining me. Rudakubana wasn't actually there for the sentencing, and he'd been incredibly disruptive earlier today. Tell us what the judge said and his decision for the sentence given.
That's right. The trial was initially delayed after Axel Rudakubana claimed that he needed paramedics, that he was suffering from chest pain. He then later, once the hearing had already begun, made similar claims and then had to be removed as he was shouting for help. And then after lunch, when the hearing resumed, a second time he disrupted proceedings that had already begun, meaning that in the end he didn't hear many of the victims' testimonies nor the sentencing remarks of the judge in the end. But what the judge said, and the point he was very keen to make, was that if Axel Rudakubana had been 18, been an adult by the time that he had committed these attacks, it would have been a slightly different situation, with him receiving a whole life sentence, as it's known in the UK, meaning there is no minimum term at which he can be released. In the end, because he was 17, just days before that attack, something the judge implied was something Axel Rudakubana did deliberately, that means the minimum time he spends in prison is 51 and a bit years. But a sentence which means, as the judge said, he is likely never to leave prison, as a parole board would have to go through that and decide he is no longer a risk. The judge made it clear that Axel Rudakubana had gone with the intention of causing as much shock and harm as possible, that his motivation was not connected to a political ideology, that it was connected with an attempt by Axel Rudakubana, a man obsessed with violence, to do as much harm as possible and to cause as much fear as possible for its own sake.
It was extremely emotional today outside the courthouse as I was watching that, and many of the victims' families were inside court today hearing those testimonies. What was their reaction to the sentencing of Rudakubana today?
Yeah, there was effectively, from reporters in the courtroom, a sigh of relief when that sentence was read out. One of the longest in history, the longest for a 17-year-old, it seems. It will come as some relief to these families that he received such a long sentence, but many of them shocked and disturbed at the evidence that was presented in court, such as photographs and details of the attack, some of which they had not heard before. The victims having an opportunity in court to read out their statements about how they had been affected, even though the defendant was not there to listen to them. Many of them talking about how their lives had been changed forever, parents talking about how their children could still not fully comprehend what exactly had happened to them, and some distressing testimony about how many of these children and some of the adults affected were no longer able to feel safe even at home. All of them seemingly talking about suffering mental trauma that will take a long time, if ever, to be resolved.
Stuart, Rudakubana has a history of violence, which was discussed in that court case and had been reported to authorities multiple times before this incident happened. Will lessons be learned? What are we hearing from the government?
The Prime Minister says that there will, and he said there will be an attempt to look at all public institutions and see where they failed, and he believes indeed they have, specifically when it comes to the UK's anti-radicalisation, counter-extremist system known as Prevent, which is designed exactly to take these troubled children, teenagers, and they should be referred to this programme, and when they are meant to receive help that will prevent them from being further radicalised. He was, Axel Rudakubana, admitted to that programme 3 times, or referred to that programme 3 times, but in the end the concerns were not taken forward. There's an investigation going to happen into why that was. There's also going to be an investigation about what to do for these usually almost always young men who are radicalised into causing acts or desiring to cause acts of violence but seemingly have no ideology. Axel Rudakubana used an Al-Qaeda training manual to help inform him about how to kill those girls, said the judge, but he wasn't acting with any particular ideology, and that's a new challenge, the Prime Minister here in the UK says, for the counter-extremist services and the intelligence services about how to stop these kinds of attacks taking place.
Stuart Smith in London, thank you so much for joining me. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has applied for arrest warrants of 2 Taliban leaders in Afghanistan. They're accused of crimes against humanity for widespread discrimination against women and girls. There was no immediate comment by Taliban leaders on the prosecutor's statement. It will now be up to a 3-judge panel at the ICC to rule on the prosecution request, which has no set deadline. The first Turkish Airlines flight in 13 years has landed in the Syrian capital Damascus today. The plane arrived from Istanbul carrying aid and 345 passengers, including Turkish Airlines CEO Bilal Eski and officials. Qatar Airways was the first international carrier to announce it would resume Damascus services, which began on the 7th of January. Syrians returning home are having to navigate hundreds of landmines littered across the country from the Assad regime. The former government had reportedly planted thousands across the country, mainly on farmland. At least 144 people have been killed by them and other unexploded remnants since December, according to the Halo Trust. Ukraine is cracking down on the sale of illegal weapons and ammunition. Law enforcement agencies have conducted some 1,000 raids across the war-torn country. There have been concerns about weapons smuggling since Russia's 2022 invasion. Trump's envoy for special missions says NATO allies must pay their fair share before enlarging the group. Richard Grenell spoke on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, calling out the Dutch specifically. Grenell said there was a risk of running into a big buzzsaw in America if the NATO Secretary General added Ukraine to the organisation. And finally, it'll soon be more expensive to climb the world's tallest mountain. Nepal is set to charge $15,000 for those seeking to summit Mount Everest during peak season. That's up 36% from its current cost of $11,000. It is the first time the price has changed in nearly a decade. Now, the 2025 Academy Award nominations have been revealed in Hollywood today, with Emilia Perez nominated for the most amount at 13, making it the highest nominated foreign film in Oscar history. Conclave, The Brutalist and Wicked have also been recognized by the Academy, with a ceremony due to take place on the 2nd of March.
Unknown, Fred Berger.
So who exactly could walk away with those top gongs? Let's speak to film critic Larushka Zadeh. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, or this evening, apologies. Let's start with Best Picture. 10 nominations. Tell us who you're tipping to win.
Yes, as you say, 10 nominations, but it's looking like it's emerging as a two-horse race. And the forerunners here, as you say, Emilia Perez, which is this crazy, out there Spanish language musical about a drug lord who's transitioning to be a woman. Don't get many of those coming along every day. But a very different film that is up against it is the film The Brutalist, which is this monumental, epic, 3.5-hour-long film about a Hungarian architect who escapes the Holocaust and comes to America in the 1940s and gets taken up by a wealthy industrialist. I sort of think of that as this year's Oppenheimer, which of course won last year. It's epic, it's huge, it's made to be meant in the cinema, it's dazzling. And what makes it extraordinary is that it was made for about 1/10 of Oppenheimer's budget, and it really doesn't look like it.
Oh, not quite sure what to say about that. But what about the Best Actress category? Many people, including myself, I was surprised that Angelina Jolie wasn't nominated for Maria, but Cynthia Evaro for Wicked and, of course, Demi Moore for The Substance. And surely they could be the top two here?
Yeah, I mean, the Best Actress race this year has been a really hard-fought race with lots of what we call snubs, lots of surprises. Yeah, as you said, Angelina Jolie not in there. Other contenders people might have expected to see there. Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl, she's not there. Kate Winslet for Lee, she's not there. But as you said, we've got Cynthia Erivo, who did a powerhouse turn in Wicked, which, along with Emilia Perez, is another musical that's up there and that's nominated. But I think, yes, as you say, Demi Moore, who's got this wonderful comeback story. It's her first Oscar at the age of 62 for this very strange film, a body horror called The Substance, which is all about Hollywood ditching aging actresses. So the fact that as an aging actress, she's come back and she's got this new career renaissance is the kind of comeback story that Hollywood loves to get behind.
And when it comes to Best Actor, nods for Adrian Brody, Timothée Chalamet and Ralph Fiennes. Is Ralph Fiennes a favourite for this category, do you think?
I think Ralph Fiennes always puts in, an extraordinary term in whatever film he's in. And he's meticulous here in this film Conclave, where he plays a cardinal who is leading the secret election for the new pope. Conclave had the most nominations at the British Academy Awards recently. However, I'm not hearing a lot of buzz about his performance. He's excellent, but it's not a sort of show-off performance. I think Adrian Brody may well win for The Brutalist, but don't discount Timothée Chalamet, who is the young star also of Dune 2, which is another one of the nominated films, and he puts in this quite mesmerising turn as the young Bob Dylan for a biopic called The Complete Unknown, which is getting quite a surprising amount of love from the Oscar voters. But I think it goes to the Oscar voters demographic, because a lot of them grew up with Dylan, a lot of them are of that age, and I think that's the reason that this film is getting a lot of attention from them.
And finally, Best Supporting. First time for singer and star of Wicked, Ariana Grande, and also the Succession actor, Kieran Culkin. So what can we get from this?
Okay, well, I mean, I found that Ariana Grande, lots of people mainly know her as a pop star, a pop superstar, but she was quite a revelation in Wicked. She was beautiful as Glinda. She put in this wonderful comic turn of her performance. I think the favourite in this category is Zoe Saldana, who seems to be picking up a lot of attention for Amelia Perez. But yes, in terms of the actor category, fans of the acclaimed US TV show Succession will feel like they're getting a bit of a sequel here, because two of the co-stars, Kieran Culkin and Jeremy Strong, who played warring brothers in that show, are up against each other. They're competing in the Best Supporting Actor category. So it'll be very interesting to see how they react on the night and who will take the final prize.
Film critic Larushka Evanvardi, thank you so much for joining me. Yes, Ariana Grande there. Let's take a look at some of the top business news. Now, the popular YouTube star Mr. Beast is holding discussions with several groups that are interested in buying TikTok. The internet's highest earning content creator, whose real name is Jimmy Donaldson, hasn't committed to any one effort but is speaking with multiple parties in hopes of attaching himself to a winning bid. Donaldson is one of many interested bidders for TikTok, which has just over 2 months to find a buyer for its US business or face a nation ban, and that nationwide ban is due to its links with China. Tesla is raising the prices of all its cars in Canada from next month, according to its website. The Model 3 costs are going up by as much as 9,000 Canadian dollars. Model Y variations will see increases of up to 4,000 Canadian dollars, while all variations of Model S and X will rise by the same amount. Tesla did not actually provide a reason for the surging prices. Sainsbury's is planning to cut more than 3,000 jobs across the UK. The supermarket said the move was a bid to save money ahead of a massive leap in costs from budget cut measures, which are due to come into force within weeks. Sainsbury's says head office and senior management roles are among those affected, adding that the cost-saving drive would also result in the closure of its remaining cafes, hot food and also pizza counters. Let's turn our attention to sports now, and Aryna Sabalenka is aiming to emulate Martina Hingis's 3 straight Australian Open titles between 1997 and 1999. Earlier today, she cruised into the final with a win over her very close friend, Paula Badosa. Sabalenka will face Madison Keys for the Grand Slam title. They've met each other 5 times on tour, with Sabalenka on 4 occasions, so she's won those matches. And Novak Djokovic is up against Alexander Zverev tomorrow in the semi-final. Manchester City have signed Omar Marmoush from Eintracht Frankfurt for £59 million. The 25-year-old has agreed a contract until June 2029, with add-ons rising to £4 million. The Egyptian forward has scored 15 goals in 17 Bundesliga games this season, second only to the England captain Harry Kane's 16 for Bayern Munich. He's expected to be available for Saturday's Premier League game, and that is against Chelsea. Staying with Man City, and the club's captain, Kyle Walker, has signed a loan deal with Italian club AC Milan for the remainder of the season. The agreement includes an option to buy the defender in the summer when the contract does come to an end. Walker, who has made 316 appearances for City, will now travel to Italy for a medical. A reminder of today's top stories. Donald Trump addresses the World Economic Forum in Davos as he reiterates his plans for the golden age of America and calls the last administration inept.
The innocent.
Tens of thousands are told to evacuate parts of LA County after a new wildfire blasts through mountainous areas 45 minutes from the city. The British teenager responsible for killing 3 schoolgirls in Southport is sentenced to life in prison. The judge said it's unlikely he'll ever be released. And Emilia Perez, Wicked and The Brutalist received the most nominations at this year's Academy Awards. And that's all from us on W News. Thank you for joining us. Hadley Gamble is coming up next with a special interview with the former Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir. And don't miss Tom Burges Watson with GNT. Good night.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
Presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome, of course, to the Saudi House. Today, we're going to be talking about climate change, Saudi Arabia in particular, their contributions to addressing global environmental challenges. His Excellency Adel Al-Jubeir is here with me. Your Excellency, it's wonderful to see you as always.
It was a pleasure.
I want to kick off, though, by asking you about what we've seen in just the last 48 hours. U.S. President Donald Trump signing a raft of executive agreements and pledging to withdraw from the Paris Accords. In your mind, does that damage the world's ability to fight climate change?
I don't believe so. I think there are different ways of achieving the objective that we all want, and countries can pursue whatever path they believe is best for them. I think the important thing is the bottom line. The Trump administration in the first term actually did a lot to reduce carbon in the United States. So this is a very positive development. I think the important thing is that we look at these discussions as cooperative discussions, not as negotiations, because we're all trying to find the most optimum path forward to dealing with the challenges in a way that's unemotional, that's logical, that's scientific, so that we can overcome this challenge that we have. We're all in this together. There are no winners or losers. We all win or we all lose. That's the attitude that we in Saudi Arabia bring to this discussion.
Just 2 years ago here at the World Economic Forum, Al Gore described what was happening in climate as boiling oceans and rain bombs. A lot of people pushed back on that at the time privately, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable doing so on a public stage. In your mind, how are these words changing when we describe climate?
We have a challenge that is before us with regard to climate change and with global warming. Nobody can dispute that. And the impact that it has on not only our climate, but on our politics, on conflicts, on not in dispute. I think what we need to adopt is a rational, scientifically based conversation, not grandstanding and not threatening, because it will be like the shepherds who cried wolf too many times and then nobody believed them. We know we have a problem. We know we have a challenge. So now that we know this, let's not talk about how it's going to kill all of us. Let's talk about how we extricate ourselves from this problem. We can do it by education. We can do it by more rational policies. We can do it by more efficient production of energy. We can do it by more efficient use of energy. We can do it by investing in alternative sources of energy. We can use it by combating desertification, by land restoration. We can use it by funding research to experiment with transformative technologies. And we are in Saudi Arabia doing all of this. We are setting aside 30% of our territory, land as well as sea, to be protected areas so that they're untouched. We are investing in greening. We are investing in transforming waste into energy. We are investing in solar, in hydro, we're looking seriously at nuclear power. We're investing in capturing carbon from the atmosphere. We're investing in a blue economy. We're investing in our seas and sustainable fishing. We are doing all of it because of two reasons. One, we live on this planet. We breathe the same air everybody does, and it's important for us that it's a healthy planet. And two, it's also very profitable. So there's an economic incentive to do this. And we have taken our experience and we expanded it into initiatives like the Middle East Green Initiative, which includes more than 22 countries, to teach countries how to incorporate the circular carbon economy approach so they can deal with environment and climate change issues the way we have been, so that we all benefit in our region. Because, as I said, we all win or we all lose. We are all in this together, and climate and pollution doesn't differentiate between one country and another. That's why the effort has to be regional and it has to be global.
Would you say then perhaps that the election of Donald Trump and his presidency is the great reset that the climate conversation needed?
I hope it would be, because I think everybody is concerned about environment, and everybody is concerned about climate, and it's important that all of us, individuals and nations and companies, do everything we can to deal with this challenge. But we will deal with this challenge. We have the technology, we have the financial resources. We need the political will to engage in a positive, cooperative conversation where we all come up with the best way forward, rather than engage in an emotional, argumentative, political scoring, hypocritical conflict that serves nobody.
Speaking of hypocrisy, over the last several days in the Financial Times, there's been reporting that billions of dollars have fled out of green ETFs and green investing. In your mind, are they jumping the gun there?
I don't know why they pulled out and what investment criteria they have. I do know that in Saudi Arabia, the investments that we have made in renewable energy, in solar, in turning waste into energy, when we're looking at nuclear, when we're looking at efficiencies, ensuring that we don't have flaring of oil and gas, that we don't have leakages, that those have been extremely profitable. We have huge investments in electric vehicles. We're looking at producing electric batteries. We're looking at storage facilities. And for us, these have been very profitable investments. So we are committed to continuing to invest in this. But in terms of the withdrawal of funds, I don't know what was the reason for them investing in those funds in the first place. I don't know what the returns are, so I'm not in a position to comment on it. But what I can say is it could be a function of people getting excited, wanting to do politically the right thing, and then realizing maybe the funds should have gone somewhere else.
When you think about what Saudi Arabia is doing in this fight against climate change and to make the planet, frankly, a better place, it was interesting, His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz just a few days ago during the Future Minerals Forum in Saudi Arabia talked about exporting enriched uranium, yellow cake. That's politically dicey, if you will, as you know. In your mind, how do you explain those kinds of exports to the world?
Very simple. We are a large energy producer in the world. We want to be an exporter of energy to the world, whether that energy is oil or gas, whether that energy is solar, whether that energy is electricity, whether that energy is hydro, whether that energy is nuclear. We want to have a nuclear program in Saudi Arabia to produce energy. We have between 1 and 4%, according to estimates, of the world's uranium deposits in country. It makes a lot of sense to exploit those resources economically by mining it. It makes even more sense that once you mine it, that you engage in the processing to turn the uranium into fuel that you can sell at a higher price. So that includes all of the steps in turning uranium from dirt into energy. And it involves taking advantage of the associated industries that come with this and taking advantage of the profits that come with this. We do not want to be a country where mining companies come in, dig up the soil, remove it, do all the processing and all the refining and all the producing of energy outside. We end up with a hole and we take less than 10% of the value chain. We want to benefit jobs, associated industry, and profits. And we believe that we can do it, as does the International Atomic Energy Agency, in a way that has nothing to do with producing nuclear weapons. Our objective is energy and profit.
Tell me this, speaking of weapons, in the years past, we've often talked about how Saudi Arabia in the 70s and Russia just a few years ago was using energy as a weapon. In your mind, how vulnerable are we today in our energy systems? And I'm talking about whether it be the enormous amount of energy that AI, as we know, is going to require, whether it be just oil markets generally. How vulnerable are we today in our energy markets?
I don't believe, I wouldn't describe it as vulnerable. I would describe it as we are looking at an increase in demand that needs to be filled somehow. Because if it's not filled, then you're going to see a huge spike in prices. And AI and data centers require a lot of energy, and that energy has to come from somewhere. We in Saudi Arabia want to be a hub for these centers. We have the land. We want to be able to, we can produce that energy using renewable energy, solar energy, other energy, and we can do it efficiently. And we believe that given our geographic location, we can have the connectivity to be able to send it abroad. So this is one of the priorities for us. So I think that this is how I would look at it. In terms of oil weaponizing energy, we have maintained for many decades that oil is not a weapon. It's not
anymore.
It's not a weapon. You can't shoot it. You can't fire it. You don't take it to the battlefield. It's a commodity, and it's a precious commodity. It relies on supply and demand, sets the price. We want to be a responsible producer. We have been a swing producer where we try to keep the markets in balance as much as we can to reduce the massive fluctuations or in the price of oil, so that it makes it easier for people to invest, to borrow money, and to return their investment, and also to plan long term. That provides stability for the global financial markets, which serves us because we are big investors and we are energy producers, and we want stability in the financial markets.
Yeah. Donald Trump is widely expected to visit Saudi Arabia in the near future. What kind of conversation do you want to have with him regarding energy and climate?
President Trump is most welcome in Saudi Arabia anytime he wants to come. And I think the conversations between Saudi Arabia and the United States, we have been allies, we have been partners for 80 years. We have huge interests, whether it's bilaterally in terms of trade, investment, in terms of cultural exchanges, in terms of students, in terms of whether it's regionally. We work very closely together on bringing peace and stability in a region, maintaining security in a region, whether it's globally, the same issue. We have very important relationships on technology, on energy, on investments. We are large investors in the U.S. economy. American companies are large investors in the Saudi economy. So it is a huge relationship, and it has many, many dimensions to it. And every time our two countries have worked closely together, they have been able to achieve great things, whether in terms of stability and security and peace regionally and globally, and in terms of prosperity for both countries when it comes to trade and investment issues.
There's a lot of speculation about what the U.S.-China relationship will be in the future. Saudi Arabia, of course, has a strong relationship both with the United States and, of course, with Beijing. How worried are you about the possibility that a trade war between the United States and China could derail your agenda as a country?
We have very strong relationships with both countries. Our relationship with the U.S. is a strategic relationship. China is our largest trading partner. We believe that stability in the global financial system and the global market serves everyone, and we hope that the two countries will be able to negotiate their differences, because a trade war does not serve the interests of either. And I believe that we have seen in the past that the two countries have been able to negotiate or resolve their issues and reach understandings through by discussing it rather than by turning it into trade wars.
Talk to me a little bit about the region when it comes to climate. Obviously, we see the UAE made a great deal of strides, obviously hosting COP28. In your mind, as Saudi looks forward to its own hosting of a COP, what are some of the things you're hoping that the region is able to achieve?
Our region, the Gulf region in particular, has done, I think, an outstanding job in terms of dealing with climate, the challenges of climate, as well as land degradation, as well as biodiversity. So the Rio Trio, the three COPs, we have invested tremendous resources in it, beginning with education and all the way to implementation. In Saudi Arabia, we have more than 70 initiatives domestically that deal with all of these issues. We have initiatives globally. I mentioned the Middle East Green Initiative. We established the Global Water Organization. That was an initiative by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince to bring clean water and how we use water more efficiently to as many people as possible. We are part of the Methane Pledge. We are involved with cleaning oceans, and we're involved with reversing pollution of plastics. We are involved in a lot of initiatives, and we have provided investments to many countries around the world to help them with resilience, to help them with beefing up infrastructure, to help them with desalination, to help them with on and on and on. We are doing a lot of things. We hosted COP16, the Earth COP, was a land degradation and drought COP, and our objective was to raise the awareness level and highlight the link, the nexus between land degradation and security. If you have land degradation, people don't have food. They move to places where they can plant food. Chances are people live there. You have conflict, you have bloodshed, you have violence, you have extremism, you have terrorism, you have migration. The migrants end up in a country where there could be a reaction that leads to extremist politics. So when you look at extremist politics in Europe, you can trace its linkage to a particular place in Africa or in the Middle East. And you can trace the origins of that conflict to drought. You look at the countries in the Sahel, 90% of the Chad River evaporated since the 1960s. It created dislocations for millions of people who moved, created conflict, and then we're paying the price. Darfur, Sudan, has been engaged in a conflict for almost 40 years. And it started with drought, and it turned into a conflict, ethnic conflict, civil war. People are paying the price, and our objective is to highlight this to people, invest early in land restoration, and avoid the consequences that will cost us 50 times more to deal with than if we had dealt with it at the outset. And the irony of all of this is investing $1 in land restoration generates between $7 and $30 in profit. This is better than investing in high tech. Why don't people do it? And this is what we're trying to show people. And it's not this is not an issue, land degradation, that concerns North Africa and the Middle East. Germany has a problem with the waters of the Rhine. Southern Europe has problems with drought. This is an issue that impacts everyone. Sweden gets dust from the Sahara Desert, as does Costa Rica. We get dust from as far away as the Chinese desert. Now, we have a lot around us. But so this is a global issue, and it's straightforward to deal with. We just need to focus on it and get it done, and this is what we're trying to do in Saudi Arabia.
You may remember President Biden's Secretary of Defense, as well as the current Secretary of Defense in the United Kingdom, have cited climate change as their number one worry for the planet, their number one concern. Now that we have Trump in the White House, is climate your number one concern for the planet?
Ours?
Yeah.
I believe for everybody, the issue of climate change, the issue of whether it's too little water or too much water, the issue of rising temperatures, everybody acknowledges this.
But is it the number one concern facing us?
I think it certainly is. If it's not the number one, it is right up there, because it impacts everything. It impacts, for example, desertification, impacts the reflection of the sun, impacts weather patterns over the Atlantic, impacts the frequency and intensity of hurricanes in the Caribbean, impacts weather climates around the world. Dust can do the same thing. And also the climate issues can impact what happens in the oceans, and the oceans are our biggest reservoir for carbon. And that impacts, again, the rain patterns. And so it's a cycle that impacts everything we do, and it's linked to economic development, it's linked to wars and conflict, it's linked to prosperity. 800 million people on the planet are undernourished. The amount of land we can grow food on shrinks. Populations are rising. So we're heading towards conflict. We have to fix these issues. And I don't believe that anyone disagrees with this. I believe the differences have to do with what's the right way to move forward in tackling these issues. And I think that grandstanding and emotions and hypocrisy and threats and shaming and naming and finger pointing doesn't get us anywhere. Rolling up our sleeves and planting trees, redesigning our cities, investing in technology, investing in alternative sources of energy, pointing out the benefits and the profitability of that path is what will get people to move towards the right direction. And when we can deal with these issues, they will have a direct positive impact on security, which will then have an impact on stability and peace.
It's interesting, over the last several days leading up to his inauguration, Donald Trump talking about Greenland. I've spent a lot of time in Russia and Ukraine, as you know. And when we talk about climate and what's happening in the Arctic, the ice, surprise, surprise, is melting. That raises security concerns. Russia has the most military intelligence hardware in the Arctic, as well as oil and gas infrastructure, as you know. In your mind, are we living in dangerous times as a result of climate change?
I think we are always living in challenging times. The history, unfortunately, of mankind has been one of wars, not peace and stability. I believe that the conflicts may shift from one region or another depending on the century we live in, but war has been a constant in our history, unfortunately. I think we are moving towards a global society, a global village. I don't want to call it village, it's too big for a village, where we now recognize that something happening at one end of the world has a direct impact on something on the other end of the world, which we never had before. How long did it take to get mail from Europe to the United States 150 years ago. Now it takes a nanosecond to get pictures and voicemail and from the Amazon forest to Siberia because of technology. How long? So now we deal with the issues of that go beyond our borders, that impact all of us positively or negatively. COVID doesn't differentiate between male, female, between Muslim, Jew, Christian, between Asian, African, European. It doesn't differentiate. We are all its target. And unless we all work together to contain it, we can't. And we did work together in spite of our differences. Maybe not ideal, but in a very effective way to contain it and push back against it. So we are, in one hand, yes, business as usual, challenging world, you called it dangerous world, but also business as unusual, which is a recognition that we need to deal with each other to handle global issues like pandemics, like climate, like transportation, and that those issues can only be handled if we work together. So on one hand, you're seeing the world coming together much more closely than before, while at the same time we're the same in the sense of our tensions. And my hope, and I believe this is where we're heading, because I'm an optimist, is that as we learn and more, as we learn of the benefits that we get by working together, the side of the side of the equation that spells cooperation grows, and the side of the equation that spells conflict gets diminished. Because where does conflict get us? Nowhere. We can have conflict for 30 years and we'll be worse off than we were when we started. Whereas if we have cooperation, technology, artificial intelligence, trade, in 30 years we can be many, many times wealthier than where we are today. Which vision do you want? Going forwards and upwards, or going backwards and downwards?
Are we, as he says, safer, the world, with Donald Trump in the White House?
I don't see why people talk about this. I think, yes, the world is safer. The world is safer with anyone in the White House. The world is safer because the world is beginning to recognize that we need to work together. We need to deal with challenges that are beyond us as nations or as ethnic groups or as religious groups, and that we have to deal with problems or challenges or dangers as humanity, that we can't escape that. And I believe that we are beginning to do this, and we will continue to do more of this. And so I'm hopeful that our children and grandchildren will be living in a world that is more together and more calm and more prosperous and more healthy than the one we live in.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
At Al Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Al Arabiya News.
It's very impressive.
Where knowledge meets perspective.
Bangkok. It's the city of angels and the Venice of the East. Bangkok is one of the most visited cities in Southeast Asia. Thailand's capital city brings hundreds of thousands of visitors from all over the world each year. The largest and most developed city in Thailand, Bangkok offers tourists a mix of modern and upscale sights and sounds while maintaining its old charm from its historical architecture and traditions that date back to hundreds of years. One of the most famous is Wat Arun, located on the west bank of Chao Phraya River opposite the Grand Palace. This is a must-see site in Bangkok, as the architectural design is completely unique to that of other temples in Thailand's capital. You can even climb its steep 70-meter high spire, which boasts the best views of Bangkok's skyline. While it is also known as the Temple of Dawn, Wat Arun is best at night when lit up, as it gives off a golden beam of light over the Chao Phraya River. The Grand Palace is the capital's most glorified and world-renowned structure. It was once the home of the Thai king, the royal court, and the administrative seat of government, and was built back in 1782. Marvel at its ancient designs, from the diverse array of Buddhist sculptures and temples that flow through the vicinity. Most popular is the Wat Prakil, or the Temple of the Emerald Buddha. Bangkok is also well known for its busy market scene. Anchored on either side of the river are boats stocked with fresh tropical fruits and veggies, coconut juice, and local food being cooked on open grills. Also popular are the floating markets Damnon Sadwak, Ampawa, and Klong Lat Mayom. Likewise, Bangkok's mall scene is alive and kicking, with enough shops stretching from Siam along Sukhumvit Road to last a lifetime. Also within Bangkok's cosmopolitan urban jungle are the expert tailors that can be seen on almost every street. You can get a tailor-made suit together for just about a week or two at a very reasonable price. Despite the city's known busyness, Bangkok also offers experiences for rest and recluse. Massage parlors can be found all over Bangkok, offering a Thai oil massage, head, neck and back massage, foot massage, and many more. One can also opt for a nature respite from the sprawling concrete jungle nearby within the city. It is known for its lush tropical trees, lakes, and raised embankments that pass unique houses on stilts built along the Chao Phraya River's edge.
At Al Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
Hello and welcome. I'm Riz Khan. The Olympic Games can trace its history back to the days of ancient Greece. But the modern Games has to deal with a very different range of issues both on and off the track, pool or piste. From wars and global warming to doping and transgender athletes, the International Olympic Committee faces a series of obstacles worthy of a steeplechase to reach the finish line of producing a successful summer or winter event. Well, for the first time in 12 years, the world's most important sporting body is about to have a new figure on top of the podium. 7 candidates have entered the race to replace Thomas Bach as the president of the International Olympic Committee. Each candidate will present their pitches to the committee next week before the final decision is made in March. Among them is the Swedish-born British billionaire businessman, environmentalist and president of the International Ski Federation, Johan Eliash. We sat down for a fascinating conversation about his vision for the future of the Olympics, including the possible addition of new sports, transgender athletes, and why Africa and the Middle East should expect to be among the host cities under an Eliash presidency. Johan Eliash, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Now, you wear a lot of different hats, but let's go back to September 2024, when you were announced to be in line for presidency of the International Olympic Committee, the IOC. Why are you so keen to have that job?
So I'm really inspired by sports' ability to unite people in peace, in harmony, working together, where everything seems to be possible, nothing impossible. And it's that inspiration that I find really fascinating, and I think also is something that is unique about sport and the Olympic movement.
You're up against a fairly competitive field of candidates, including His Royal Highness Prince Faisal Al Hussein of Jordan, Lord Sebastian Coe, who's President of World Athletics from the UK, and Juan Antonio Samaranch, whose father ran the IOC for 21 years. What do you have to say about your fellow candidates and why you would be the better pick?
So I think we have a phenomenal field of candidates. In my case, I have a long background and lots of experience in many areas which are very important to the Olympic movement. I have served in governments. I have been very active in sustainability, climate change, and climate action. I have been a keen athlete. I have turned around big companies. I managed big companies. I'm used to managing change in a very fast-changing world. I understand media, broadcasting, sponsorship, sports marketing. So I have a unique set of skills. And it wasn't by design, but it just happens to be that when you bring all this together, I am in a way uniquely qualified for the job.
We'll go through all the challenges that you might face if you become president of the IOC, but there are many people who say, why do we still need the Olympics? Why are they still relevant?
And again, it has this unique ability to unify, where athletes come to the games in a peaceful environment, and where the movement is also a very strong voice for bringing awareness to many important issues, and can do a lot more than governments can, big institutions like the United Nations or the G20 has ever been able to do.
Well, the IOC has a fairly checkered history with a lot of controversies, including doping scandals, the issue of bribery allegations linked to rigging of bids to host the Olympics, and then the banning of Russia's anthem, flag, and name from international sporting events. Considering all these issues, do you really still want the job?
As I said, I think the Olympic movement is phenomenal, what it does. And yes, it has a rich history and it's had its challenges. And that's also why it's so important to have an experienced and qualified leader of the movement. Because the expectations are set very high. And if something goes wrong, the consequences can be very damaging.
What is your vision for the Olympic movement, and how would you ensure that it remains relevant in the coming decades? Let's go to the headlines first, and then we can explore in more detail.
So, I mean, what is very important is that we stay ahead of the curve in every sense, and that is we need to put the sport at the front. Same with the athletes. Strong focus on the athletes. We need to be very good on digital. AI is clearly something that is going to have a profound impact. It's not going to think for us, but we can make a lot of things much more efficient and easier to attain by using AI. Technology, of course, same thing here. We need to embrace new technologies, make sure that when new technologies are invented, bring them into what we do. We need to defend our political neutrality, and that's really important, that athletes are not weaponized for political purposes, because no athlete can ever
We'll get into some of those issues in just a moment, but I want to touch on the fact that the Olympic Games do bring in billions of dollars for the IOC, and yet there's growing concern about the costs associated with hosting the Olympic Games. So what reforms would you propose in order to address those challenges?
So here I believe we can do more for less, using new technologies, perhaps involving the international federations more in the event delivery. Because let's face it, we do these events day in, day out. The IOC, they do events 2 weeks every 2 years. So are there synergies there? Absolutely. We just need to figure out how we can best take advantage of them. So yes, I believe we can do more for less. And yes, I think with technology opportunities, digital opportunities, clear sponsorship architectures that are constantly developed, and choosing the right strategy for what kind of broadcaster we want to be in the future, there is great scope for generating much more revenue and reduce our cost structure.
Now, Mr. Eliash, how would you address the growing concerns about the commercialization of the Olympic Games while trying to maintain their integrity and prestige?
Well, I mean, every sport has to be commercial in the way it approaches things, without compromising the integrity of the sport, the athletes, and of course, delivering an event that has the biggest possible reach. And it's always a fine balance between reach and the money, but you can always find the right balance. And here is where we need to think very carefully about how we can, for instance, use streaming more effectively to get a bigger footprint in terms of viewership, and how we can advance storytelling, because there are so many wonderful stories and so many stories that people are interested in between the games, so that we're not just relevant for 2 weeks every 2 years.
Well, TV advertising has long been the mainstay for the Olympic Games, but younger generations, younger audiences tend to consume content across social media rather than the mainstream media or legacy media. So how should the IOC adapt to the digital era?
Well, that's very much something that we have to adapt to, because people consume content differently today. And it may not have shown up entirely in the numbers that we see from linear broadcasters or in terms of long-term sponsorship arrangements. Here, we need to be very much digging in deep, analyzing, and here, I mean, people, just to give you one trend, people, they want highlights, they want short clips, they don't necessarily use television screens, but their mobile phones to consume content. And here, new technologies such as cloud-based delivery of programming is going to be essential. The IOC, they have been doing a great job at taking this to heart, and this is something that we have to intensify and do even more about, so we always stay ahead of the curve.
Mr. Eliash, I know that for years you've combined your passion for both sports and sustainability through rainforest conservation to combat climate change, even in your role as president of the International Ski Federation. So what steps do you think the IOC should take to make the Olympic Games more environmentally sustainable and to reduce their massive carbon footprint?
So, I mean, what we've done at the FIS, we've launched an impact program where we look at ways to minimize the carbon footprint everywhere we go. And here with the IOC, I think, and by the way, they have great programs run by Prince Albert, who has really contributed in this area. And here, I believe what is really important is that wherever we go, we leave a legacy behind. And with the Winter Games, here we have new challenges due to change in the climate, which is profound. And that is, we need to go higher and higher in altitude to have snow security. So we need to take that on board. We also need to make sure that therefore the places we pick are not only used once, but can be used many times. We need a rotation scheme, and this has been invented before me, and it is something which I'm fully behind. And I have already said in my capacity as the biggest federation within the Winter Games, because we deliver more than 50% of the medals in the Winter Games and over 80% in the Paralympic Winter Games. And that is, we will support the locations to make sure that those locations invest in the event delivery. And if we do that, we can play a part as a federation. I hope if I'm elected, this is something that I will really push for. And then we'll have a rotation scheme between a set number of regions, locations, where you rotate the games over a long-term cycle.
On a similar theme, FIFA moved the football calendar to allow Qatar to host a Winter World Cup. And Saudi Arabia will be hosting the tournament in 2034. So would you be prepared to move the Summer Olympics to winter in order to accommodate hot climate countries so that they can host the event?
Well, if you look at the front page of my manifesto, curiously, what you see there is a picture of the globe with Africa, the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia. And there's a thought behind that, and that is these are places where we haven't been. We've been to South America, we've been to China, we've been to Australia, and of course Europe, North America, and so forth. But we must not forget Africa. It's a big continent with a lot of people, and this is a place we need to go to. Same with the Middle East. We've never been in the Middle East, and we haven't been to India. Now, some people may say that this would be challenging because of calendar issues, lack of infrastructure in some places, etc. But careful planning, and if we plan ahead, I am convinced that we can overcome every obstacle and deliver magnificent games. In fact, wherever we go in the world.
Well, Saudi Arabia is fast becoming known as a location for hosting top international events, from football and boxing to golf and tennis. Would you welcome a bid from Saudi Arabia to host the Olympic Games?
We should encourage each and everyone to apply, and I would say in the case of Saudi Arabia, their commitment and dedication to sport is fantastic, and I remember years ago when they started promoting the idea of actually doing snow-based events. People said that can't be true. Where do you find snow in Saudi Arabia? But they actually do have snow, and they do have mountains reaching 2,600 meters, and they have invested in building up ski resorts. So yes, everything is possible. If Saudi Arabia applied, I think we should take that very, very seriously.
Earlier, you mentioned that the Olympic Games can be a platform for unity, peace and justice. If so, how can the IOC make judgments on who can participate at times of geopolitical conflict, such as we have with Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Gaza?
Yeah, so here there is one very important principle, and that is athletes, they can't choose where they were born. So, at the same time, they should never be politicized or weaponized for political purposes. That's sacrosanct for me and for, I hope, most people. And here we have to defend sports political neutrality. Of course, we are always going to tread in political waters, but we have to defend our political neutrality because otherwise it's a slippery slope which does not end up in a good place. Here we have a special program for independent neutral athletes, which worked very well during Paris. And if it has to be used, then of course, this should be used, but we should never be drawn into politics.
The vast majority of Olympic athletes and audiences watching at home want to be sure that they're watching a fair competition devoid of cheating and doping scandals and so on. If you become IOC president, how would you reassure them?
So I think here, I mean, we have very good anti-doping agencies in WADA, and we have very stringent testing programs to make sure that this is very much monitored and to avoid anyone cheating. Of course, another topic that has come up is with women's sport. And how, for me, at least, very important that we ring fence women's sport. Now, this is a separate topic, but I bring that up because it's been talked about much. And here it is very much, we have to protect women, ring fence their sport, because if not, it becomes something else. And that can never be the case.
Well, that became a major issue in Paris when the Olympics were held there, where the issue of transgender athletes became a big debate. How would you approach that particular issue?
Very much science-based, not based on trends or ideology. It has to be science-based. It's the only fair way of doing it.
There's only one woman in the lineup of 7 candidates to be IOC president. What would you do to promote greater gender equality, not just in the Olympic participation, but also in the IOC leadership roles?
I think across the board here, the IOC have done a very good job at promoting gender equality and making sure that you have balanced gender participation. This is something that I very much promoted also within the FIS. I say here that it should have been more women in this race, and hopefully in years to come, next time there will be more women candidating for the presidency.
When we look at athletes across the global spectrum, there's still a huge discrepancy in terms of the resources available to competitors, from training facilities and equipment to ideal nutrition, to the latest scientific training techniques, and even access to sports medicine to deal with injuries in the best way possible. So what can the IOC do to level the playing field so that athletes from developing nations have the same kind of opportunities as those from established sporting nations?
This is why the IOC have solidarity programs to proliferate and to help and invest in countries that are developing from the developing world. And this is really important. And there's one thing that I've always said is that within the International Ski Federation, no matter where you come from, where your federation is based, we're all equally special. And that is very important to me. So we should all have equal opportunity as far as it is possible. Equal opportunity training, equal opportunity to participation. Now, of course, we're not there yet, and that's not going to happen overnight. But we must strive to achieve that.
Now, I know, Mr. Elias, you're a very enthusiastic and accomplished skier, and you'll know that snowboarding was kind of looked down upon compared with traditional skiing for a long time. And there are many sports fans who have strong views about what sports should be added or could be added to the Olympic Games. In recent years, we've had BMX, skateboarding, and even breakdancing added to the Summer Games, while, of course, snowboarding has long been now a part of the Winter Olympic Games. How do you get the balance right between appealing to younger generations with these newer sports while still preserving the tradition of the competition?
Yeah, I mean, that's really important because we compete against lots of other sports. And we have to remain super attractive. Yeah, here it's we need to bring in be open-minded and bring in new sports. It's very, very important. I mean, at FIS, for instance, I brought in free ride. Why did I do that? Because it's super attractive. It has a great following, and I mean the television pictures that you get are fantastic. And that is what we need. Similarly, I mean, if we look here at new format, what I would do is promote relays with able-bodied and Paralympic athletes, because that will help. It's to proliferate Paralympics, lift that up more, and create more interest. And the more interest we can have in the Paralympics, the better it is for the sport as a whole. So it's small, sometimes big ideas in this direction. And of course, there are many sports out there that we should continue bringing in. But of course, we can't do everything in one go. So we need to do this gradually, step by step.
Now, I'd like to get your view on just a couple of sports that have strong support for inclusion in the Olympic Games. They require more skill than athleticism. So let's have a look at esports and darts. Now, why shouldn't dart players take their place alongside, for example, archers in the Olympic Games?
So if we start with esports, this is something which has grown immensely in popularity. There's over 260 million participants in esports, and that is very complementary for the Olympic movement, and that is why we have a strong push there. And we'll have the first esports Olympics very soon in Saudi Arabia, by the way. Now, when it comes to darts and other new sports, there is obviously a long list of sports that want to participate. Again, this has to be done step by step. It has to be evaluated, and that is an ongoing process, which, by the way, the IOC have been very good at.
Now, I'd like you to take a step back from your potential role as president of the IOC to that of just a spectator of sports, because there are many people who believe the Olympics have drifted quite far from their original spirit of just fair, free international competition, now marred very much by politicking and scandals. What chance is there to get the Olympic Games right back to their roots?
but it should always be based on pure competition. But how we display the sport, that is constantly evolving with social media, with different, storytelling, which is very important, particularly to remain relevant in between the games. Youth Olympic Games, qualifying series, etc. So the competitive spirit, that principle, that will always be there. I can't see how that would ever change. Now, for us to remain competitive with other sports, it's equally very important that we stay ahead of the curve, and this is where the whole, shall we say, sports environment has to be closely observed, and we have to keep up with the latest trends and invest in the latest technology, and that's the foundation for what we do.
Well, we wish you well for your IOC candidacy. I wonder, will you have time to devote to all the other things you do, especially sustainability projects like Cool Earth, the organization you co-founded for rainforest conservation? Will you be able to cram all this in, since you have so much on your plate all the time?
I think today there are many very good people involved in these activities, so I'm sure they will continue that work with or without me. So, but the one thing I am really committed to, and that is proliferating our voice in climate action, to spread awareness and getting things done, because here we can do a lot.
Well, Johan Elias, it was a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Johan Elias there on his bid to become president of the International Olympic Committee. Well, we talked about some potential new sports for the Games, with BMX, skateboarding and snowboarding winning their place at the Olympic schedule in recent years, and breakdancing making its debut at last year's Paris Olympics. But did you know that as different events come and go, some of those which have fallen out of favour included tug of war, hot air ballooning, live pigeon shooting and painting. That admittedly was a bit like watching paint dry. And at the first modern Olympics at the English village of Much Wenlock in 1867, the most popular event was called Tilting at the Ring, in which riders on horseback used a lance to unhook a small metal ring from a wooden crossbar. I wonder if it's time for that one to return. Well, we know who to ask if he gets the job. I'm Riz Khan from me and the team. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Hello and
welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive insights and fresh perspectives from leading experts and influential decision makers every weekday here on Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's programme, as many as 10,000 soldiers could be sent to the US-Mexico border as part of President Trump's effort to tackle illegal immigration. Well, in anticipation of mass deportations, Mexico is building temporary shelters along the border. The bishop who pleaded with the US President Donald Trump to have mercy on migrants has broken her silence. She says she will not be apologizing to him as the president demanded. The US President Donald Trump calls the Ukraine conflict a ridiculous war and threatens Russia's President Putin to end it immediately or face sanctions. And the fire-stricken US state of California faces more dangerous winds as a new wildfire flares up, forcing more than 30,000 people to evacuate. Hello and welcome to the programme. Now, as President Donald Trump presses ahead with his crackdown on immigration, as many as 10,000 troops could be sent to the US-Mexico border. Well, this follows a series of executive orders that were signed by President Trump when he took office on Monday. Well, the president has also ordered 1,500 troops to the border to install barriers. Well, the president has declared a national emergency along the southern border and ordered the Defense Department to provide these troops and resources to support Border Patrol officials. Well, for more, we're joined now by Michael Dubke, who is the former White House Communications Director under President Donald Trump. Thank you so much for speaking to us. We're being told up to 10,000 troops could be sent to the southern border. I'm just wondering, what do you think their role will be?
Well, I think their role is going to be exactly as you describe it. They are going to assist with the customs agents that are already there. There is a want and a need to get the wall that Americans have voted for built. And I think those troops that go to the southern border will be helping with that effort.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering how much of a difference 10,000 troops will make to the situation on the border. After all, it's a very long border indeed, isn't it?
It is a long border, and several parts of the border already do have border walls up. Congress had allocated funds for a border wall, but part of any effort on a very long border, as you say, is to get it built and to get it up. And I think 10,000 or probably now 20,000 new hands to help with that is going to make a major difference. The other part of this is really perception. During the first Trump administration, there was a perception that you could not just come to the border, check in with customs officials and have them release you into the United States. So it's called catch and release. That is a program that also has been discontinued by the national emergency declared by President Trump. And there needs to be, the perception for individuals traveling to the border now is that not only is that program gone, but you've got 10,000 troops ready and willing to make sure that individuals do not cross.
Okay, 10,000 troops and a 3,000-kilometer border. I mean, they're going to be thinly dispersed. I'm just wondering, though, when President Trump... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it is a long border, but there are very specific areas in which individuals cross that border. So while it's a long border, they will be able to surge to the areas that see most of the traffic. It's a long border, but it's not an easily traversed border in many spots.
When we hear President Trump talking about record illegal border crossings, I mean, do the numbers back that up?
Yes, they do. In the Biden administration, we had a surge of individuals coming across the border. If you compare the 4 years of the Trump administration to the 4 years of the Biden administration, you saw a exponential increase. Now, what happened in July of 2024 is the Biden administration started to implement some of the old policies of the Trump administration, and we saw the border numbers decline. I mean, that tells you something. They had 3.5 years of basically open border. As we were coming into an election, they re-implemented some of the old programs, and they worked. So what we're going to see in Trump 2.0 is the same thing, and frankly, on steroids when you consider the troops that are being sent down there as well.
President Trump spoke to Fox News in an interview that was aired last night. He said that prisons from all over the world have been emptied out into our country. Is that really the case?
I don't know if that is the case, or if that's just a bit of hyperbole, that prisons have been emptied out, because, frankly, that implies that there's a coordinated effort by other nations to send the worst possible individuals to the United States through the southern border. But I will say this: there is a large concern that individuals that have committed crimes, and some of them violent crimes, have easily crossed over the border into the United States, and we have no idea where those individuals are. There's also concern that terrorists have crossed over the border. And if you look at the border numbers, it's not just South Americans and Mexicans that are crossing the border. You have individuals from Haiti, from Asia, from all over the world that have recognized that if they can just get to Mexico and get to that southern border, they can get into the United States without any paperwork.
And there is this perception that people who enter the country illegally or who cross the border, immigrants of any description, are more likely to commit crimes. And it's something we hear a lot from people in Donald Trump's inner sanctum. But the numbers suggest otherwise, don't they?
Well, they do, but here's the problem. How do we know? We don't know who's coming across the border. When you have a situation in which you have no idea who's coming across the border, it allows you to make some suppositions on who those individuals are. I am sure that the vast majority of the individuals that are crossing the border are doing it for economic reasons, for a better life for their family. But that still doesn't alleviate the fact that you do have criminals, you do have individuals that want to cause harm to the United States crossing that border, and for us to have no idea who they are and where they are. I mean, the idea of a border, it defines a nation. And when you have an open border, when you have the inability to track individuals that cross it, you might as well not even have a nation at that point.
Quite interesting to see Democrats supporting some of this immigration legislation. That marks a bit of a change, doesn't it, from the first Trump presidency, when Democrats were inclined to vote against it regardless.
The actual funny part about this is the early legislation before Donald Trump on the border wall was a bipartisan bill. The original dollars to build a border wall was voted for by both Republicans and Democrats, and probably some Democrats you'd be surprised by supporting it. I think during the Trump administration, Democratic reluctance had more to do with their adverse reaction to Donald Trump as president than it had to do with any real change of heart in policy. But I think what the 2024 election showed is that to both Democrats and Republicans, is that the American people want the flow of immigration, unchecked immigration at the southern border, to be stopped. We are a country of immigrants, but we're a country of immigrants that apply, follow the rules, and then come to the United States. What we have down on the southern border fits none of that at the moment, and that's what Donald Trump and the new administration is trying to change.
But we have to also look beyond the southern border, because there are going to be these crackdowns in cities around the United States. A bit more complicated, isn't it, to sort of round up people for example, for deportation, as President Trump has suggested, in cities around the United States, especially cities where perhaps you won't get cooperation from local officials. And I'm thinking of New York, Chicago, where perhaps the authorities will be less inclined to support these initiatives. How do you see it all working?
Well, just because something is difficult or hard doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And when you talk to officials at Homeland Security or with ICE, they have identified individuals who have crossed the border. They know where they are, and they know their previous history, and in some cases, violent criminal history. And they are targeting those individuals first. I can't believe that a sheriff or a law official in Chicago or New York wouldn't want these individuals off their street. So under the first wave, or the initial at least, what the Trump administration has been talking about, I fully expect that the law enforcement in those cities, even deep blue, democratically controlled cities, will cooperate in this effort, because it is getting criminals off the street, at least in the initial round.
All right, we'll leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Michael Dubke. Thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Have a good week.
Meanwhile, the bishop who angered President Trump during a prayer service on Tuesday says she will not be apologizing to him. Marianne Edgar Budd made a direct appeal to the president during a post-inaugural prayer service, asking the president to show mercy to citizens who may be fearful of his presidency, including migrants who are in the US illegally. Well, the president said the bishop and her church owed the public an apology, and he described the church service as having been boring and uninspiring. Let's take a listen to her remarks.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meatpacking plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals. They may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
Well, for more on this, we can speak now to Pastor Mark Burns, who is President Trump's personal spiritual advisor, who joins us now from South Carolina. Thank you so much for joining us once again, Pastor Burns. Good to see you. We've got lots to talk about today, but I'd like to start by asking you about that bishop who we were just listening to before we crossed to you. She issued that plea of mercy to President Trump at a church service on Tuesday. Didn't go down very well with the president. Was she wrong to issue that plea of mercy?
Well, you know, I know some may call it a plea of mercy, but it's really not a plea of mercy. It's pushing false propaganda and a woke agenda message that the American people rejected. And they rejected it because they reelected Donald Trump as the 47th president of the United States of America. Gay people in America have nothing to fear. Immigrants in America have nothing to fear. Criminal elements of illegal aliens or illegal immigrants, they have everything to fear. Those bad characters that have infiltrated our nation to do harm, with child sex trafficking, drugs that are pouring in through these bad characters, the rapings and the violent crimes that the FBI has reported, over 700,000 violent crimes by undocumented aliens. Those individuals have everything to worry about because, again, the president has made it very clear, we're coming after you, we're deporting you back to the country you've come from. And to those other illegal immigrants that are here that are just wanting to find a better life, those people, we want them to go through the process the correct way, to not be here illegally. For we need to know who you are and where you come from. And so that's the true message. But this woke agenda message that the so-called bishop who embarrassed her faith, embarrassed her denomination, and took another time to push a Democratic woke agenda political message that the American people as a whole has rejected, she should be ashamed of herself. She should resign or be removed from her post immediately.
Yeah, I mean, Bishop Marianne Edgar Budd said she felt compelled to speak up. I mean, shouldn't people speak up in a democracy? You might not like what they say, and you can disregard it, can't you?
Well, I think that there's a time and a place for everything, the Bible says. There's a time for everything, and that was not the time to push her woke, rejected agenda message onto the American people in front of the president when she was there to bring unity, peace, comfort, and joy, that there's a new dawn. Whether she agrees with President Trump's policies or not, her position is to be a spiritual guide. Again, it'd have been different if she would have said something like, Mr. President, I'm so grateful that you're here, and let us make sure that we do everything we can to keep God at the center of our message and the policies that we have, that the poor get fed, that the less unfortunate get taken care of. That's a message of plea and a message of mercy to the less fortunate, of all races and all colors, genders and sex. But to push the woke message that has been rejected by the American people, the woke message by suggesting that gay people or members of the LGBTQ community have to worry about their safety and their freedom and their rights, and to suggest that the immigrant in this nation, which is the bedrock of America, we are the great melting pot of immigrants from all over the world, to suggest that immigrants have to worry under the Trump administration. That is the same message that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Barack Obama was pushing to keep people from voting for Donald Trump. But we see the message being rejected, just like in New York City, where Mayor Eric Adams is now pushing, identifying the migrant crisis that is happening in the city. He said the Democratic Party has left him. When you look at California now, we're seeing that it is starting to turn from a solid blue to now it is pushing to a purple. And we believe that it's going to ultimately turn red, meaning to the Republican side, because people are tired of this fake, lie, woke agenda message that this so-called bishop pushed onto the president and to the American people. It is a lie. Immigrants have nothing to worry about. Gay people, you have a right under the Constitution. Whether I personally agree with it or not, that's irrelevant, because my faith dictates what I believe. And this bishop, again, the Bible is very clear on that particular message, but that's not my job to dictate who can love who. The Constitution of the United States of America, in which Donald Trump just swore as the 47th president to protect and to defend, is going to abide by the Constitution. And the Constitution protects the gay community to love who they want to love. So it's a false narrative that she's pushing forward. It's creating more division and pushing a false narrative, just like the Democrats do, by keep suggesting to the black community that Republicans will put black people back in chains, back in slavery. That's false mentality, the false lie. It didn't belong in the St. John's Cathedral worship service, and it doesn't belong in American society. Yes, speak up, but not at that time. That was the wrong time and place.
Okay, Pastor Burns. I mean, I have to say, you know, she is a bishop, so we can't call her a so-called bishop. You might not like her, but she's a bishop. I mean, how uncomfortable do you think Donald Trump was feeling during that church service? I mean, you've probably seen the pictures. I mean, you know, looking at his expression on his face, he looked visibly irritated, didn't he?
Well, I mean, again, I think that, again, the bishop was completely wrong for doing so. I mean, that was not the appropriate time or the appropriate place to push her political message. She is clearly a staunch liberal. And then that's what's wrong with the church today. You can't be, it's difficult for me to understand that you could be a Christian who follows the message of Christ. And that, yes, has mercy, but also calls for repentance. Right? That means to turn from your wicked ways. Isaiah says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves, pray, seek my face, turn from your wicked ways, then I will heal your land. This bishop is talking about mercy, but without repentance. And that is not the message of Jesus. That is, the Bible is very clear. You have to repent from your sins. That means you stop doing it. You stop living a lifestyle that is contrary to God's word. You cannot get angry at me, get angry at the Bible, because that's what the Bible says. And that's why I call this bishop a so-called bishop, because she is not upholding the true word of God. She's taking bits and pieces of mercy and grace, which that is true. God is a God of mercy and a God of grace, but he also is a God of repentance. That's why he says, turn from your evil doings and seek my face. Turn from your wickedness. Repent, for the kingdom of God is here. That is throughout the Bible, meaning you cannot continue to live a lifestyle that is contrary to God's word.
All right, would you say the Pope is a so-called Pope? Because he's said things that are quite similar to what Bishop Budd said. He's called President Trump not Christian because of his views on migration. He said there's no room for hatred, there's no room for discrimination, there's no room for exclusion. How's that any different from what the bishop said?
Well, I would agree. I think the Pope most definitely is a so-called Pope. He does not, again, and you have the own Catholic community that is uproaring, your own Catholic community that is speaking against their own Pope, that submits to the authority of the Pope. And so if the Catholic community is being divided by what their Pope is saying, then absolutely, I agree. To push the Caliph on the nativity scene, to push a political message by pushing an agenda, that is absolutely not the place of the Pope. And it's very disappointing to see his very liberal views on that community when the Bible is very clear on our stance. And it's not my personal opinion on that particular matter. It is the opinion of the Word of God. And the Pope should be laying down the foundation of what God's Word says. Concerning the migrants, the Pope has a wall in the Vatican City. I think he's extremely hypocritical. He is not letting anyone inside the Vatican City. He is not letting anyone just cannot go through the gates. Let's drop off tens of thousands of migrants in his city and see how he responds. That's the same thing that's happening to New York City, Eric Adams, when, all the migrants are saying, yes, come to New York. And then when they come, they realize, oh, my God, this is not a good idea because the citizens are complaining. This is not a good idea. Crime is going up. This is not a good idea. We got to do something about this. So the Pope is hypocritical to talk about migrants when he himself has a wall around the Vatican City, and you have to have special clearance to enter inside the Vatican. So that's very hypocritical.
I'm not sure when you last went to the Vatican, because the last time I went there, it was quite easy to sort of walk in and out and enjoy St. Peter's Square and enjoy the enormous...
Well, I'm not talking
premises.
about the public locations of St. Peter's Square. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the sanctuaries of the Pope. And again, even your own home. You don't let anybody inside your own home. I can't just walk inside your home. Right? It's your dominion. You are responsible for your family. I don't know if you're married or if you have children, but you're responsible for your family. You will not just let anyone, no matter how much you love people, no matter how much you want to help people, you won't just let me into your home without permission. And that's all that's been taking place, to suggest that any and everybody could come to your house, into your bedroom, into your kitchen without your permission is preposterous. And that's all that the president is saying. It's very hypocritical for people to suggest that. We should help people. Absolutely. Help the poor. Absolutely help those that are less fortunate. But we should not break the law to do it. We should not just let people in when there is a process put in place for people who are in those situations to follow, but they choose to break the law. And most people who come here to by breaking the law are already people who you should question their true motives as to why they are there. If I break into your house, you're not going to sit me down for a cup of tea right after. You're going to kick me out and throw me in jail.
I won't kick you out, Pastor Burns. I'd sit you down and have a chat with you. But listen, the statistics don't support that argument. The statistics suggest that immigrants who come to the United States are actually less likely to commit crimes than people who are born in the United States. So that argument doesn't really hold water, does it?
Well, no, again, I'm not suggesting, and you're putting words to my mouth, I'm not suggesting that all migrants or illegal immigrants that enter into our nation...
Right, they're the minority.
...are criminal. Again, the president's made it very clear. His first goal, and that's why this so-called bishop, she's a so-called bishop because she's not preaching the true message of repentance, but the so-called bishop who is used her platform to push a false, woke message. Right. That was a false woke message that the Democrats used to campaign against Donald Trump. And she repeated it, even though he's already won. We're done campaigning. The people have spoken by large majority. They want President Donald Trump. Yet she still took that opportunity instead of bringing peace. Again, the president, having Mayor Eric Adams, who's a staunch Democrat. But yet the president is inviting people from the opposite party to bring unity. We may not agree on everything, but where we can agree, we will work together. That's what politics should be like. But people like this so-called bishop, she once again, instead of unifying the nation and saying, I may disagree with your policies, but I'm a woman of God, and it's my authority to base my decision based off of his word. I am going to accept you, Mr. President, and pray for you and do all that I'm supposed to do to make sure that you are a successful president. That's how it should have been done. That's not how it was done. And that's why so many have rejected her message.
Just for the benefit of our viewers, we're speaking here to Pastor Mark Burns, the spiritual advisor of the US President Donald Trump. Happy to have you with us again, Pastor Burns. Just looking at sort of religious texts on the subject of immigration, I mean, some of them are open to interpretation, but on the whole, they seem to be very welcoming of the idea of immigrants applied to the modern context. I mean, you look at texts like Deuteronomy, where it says, do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, you were foreigners in Egypt. Or Galatians, that says, neither a slave nor free, there is no male nor female, you're all one in Jesus Christ. I mean, it is quite a loving sort of set of texts when it comes to the subject of welcoming people into your country and not treating people like outsiders. How do you reconcile not being welcoming to people entering the United States with those sorts of texts?
Well, see, I think, again, you're putting words into our mouths.
I'm not putting words into your mouth. I'm asking you to reflect on those texts.
Well, I don't think that we're not welcoming. That's what I mean. I don't think we're not welcoming at all. Jesus also said this to his apostles, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Render unto God what belongs to God. In other words, the apostles were talking to Jesus about the law of taxes. And Jesus repeated that message to the apostles. We are supposed to render unto Caesar what belongs to him, the law. Render to God what belongs to God. America is not welcoming to the migrant or the immigrants, not at all. We're simply saying that we want you to come, but come through the right process. You are creating a false narrative, again, that America is just so vile against immigrants, and that's not the case at all. Black people in America are immigrants. Matter of fact, almost every race in America are immigrants, with the exception of the Native American Indians, like the Cherokee and the Navajo. But outside of that, most of us are ancestors to immigrants. And so to suggest that we are not welcoming is a lie. We are to not break the law. We're not to break the law to help those who are breaking the current law. It is our job to uphold the law. And of course, I may have a personal desire to help somebody who is here illegally, but also my conviction will have me remember what Jesus said. I cannot break the law. I need to render to Caesar that belongs to him. Honor what belongs to Caesar. That is the law of the land. And right now, the law says you can come to America. We are welcoming you to America. We can help you in America. We can help get you jobs. We can help raise your family in America. But you have to come through the correct way. This notion that it is a free market where you can just come, again, that is preposterous. That is breaking the current law. And until the law is changed, we have to render unto Caesar which belongs to Caesar.
But it sounds like, in a way, you agree with some of what Bishop Budd said, because she said the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay their taxes. They're good neighbors.
Yes.
I disagree with that
part is true.
Yeah, that's true.
So does the president. So there's the president. The president doesn't disagree with that. Again, we're talking about the criminal elements that have infiltrated our nation illegally. And
the minority.
A large majority, but it doesn't matter. Again, the fact is they're creating devious criminal acts. And unfortunately, we don't know who that may be. We do know that if you come here illegally, when there is a legal process to do so, when there's a legal process to do so. And many of these people who are coming through here illegally, I'm happy we're putting a stop to this because, again, those people who do want a better life, who do want to come here to pay taxes, who do want to change, raise their children in safety, what education, etc., those people are getting raped. Those people are getting taken advantage of by some bad characters. Those people are getting sold into sex slavery. Those people are going missing. Those people are getting their lives destroyed by these mules that are taking advantage. But how can you know who's who? How do you know who's doing that versus who's not doing that? We have to know who they are. To suggest, again, I use the analogy of the house, and I disagree with you. I don't think you would sit me down for a cup of tea. You may know Pastor Mark Burns. He may say, hey, you'll sit me down. But if a random person showed up in your house, broke in your house, right, in the middle of the night, sir, you are not going to sit them down for a cup of tea and have a chat. You're not. You're going to pick up your gun, if you have one, or your bat, or your knife, and you're going to defend your home and ask questions later. So please don't try to create this false narrative that we are incorrect for people who are coming to us illegally, not legally, but illegally. They're coming here on day one, breaking the law. That is not a good look. When there is a process to come here legally. That's all the president has asked for. That's what the American people are asking for. Remember, in the 1930s, we had the Manhattan, the immigration came through the Manhattan Island. And so, therefore, I'm pushing the agenda of recreating what's called the Manhattan Project. The Ellis Island Project. Ellis Island, where the Statue of Liberty was. And in Ellis Island, where immigrants came in and they were processed quickly. We knew who they were. We knew where they come from. You can go to Ancestry.com and look at your great-great-grandmother, great-great-great-grandfather when they first came into America. We knew, where they lived. We knew we had their name, their sex, you understand what I mean? They entered and they came through quickly. That's something that I'm pushing forward, where we recreate the Ellis Island Project, where that helps immigrants come into our nation quickly, those that can add to, those that brings value to America. Many are discussing this very same project. So to continuously push the false narrative that Donald Trump despises immigrants or America is not welcoming to immigrants, that is a lie, sir. Many of us on the conservative side are compassionate for those that are seeking true asylum or seeking true safety in the walls of America, but they need to come through here legally. That's all we're asking. But again, I think you're lying to yourself to suggest that if I broke into your house illegally, you would sit me down for a cup of tea. That's foolish. You would get your knife or your gun and your bat, and you would try to bash my head in before you sit down and ask me any kind of questions.
Okay, well, you've created a very complicated scenario. Let's move on, Pastor Burns, because I want to ask you about President Trump. You are his spiritual advisor. Have you spoken to him this week?
Yes, I have.
How's he doing?
Again, we're excited. I mean, the president is excited. As you can see, he hit the ground running. I mean, he's the president of the United States of America. Again, no thanks to you and the mainstream media, but he did it because of the will of the people. He is excited. He is optimistic about the future. He knows that he needs the hand of God over his life to continuously do this job. He's more spiritual and more acceptable to spiritual advice. And that, I'm really excited about it. He is in tune to the voice of God, but also he knows his job, his role, not as the pastor of the United States of America, but as the president of the United States of America.
Do you think he's changed much from his first term in office?
Of course, absolutely. He's more wiser. He's more stronger. He was always smart and wise the first time, but he's even great. He knows what he's doing even more now. He knows where all of the nuances of being president and what he needs to do. That's why he's surrounding himself around strong supporters who knows his vision, and he knows that for a fact they will carry out his vision for America. None of these backdoor stabbing snakes who will cut Donald Trump at the drop of a dime. None of these Judases that were surrounding him the first time he was president. No, he's putting himself around strong patriots, proven battleground patriots who have shown that they believe in the America First agenda and that they would do whatever it takes to support the political agenda and the policies of Donald J. Trump to make sure that his vision for America is actually carried out and not stabbed in the back by Judases who are surrounding him.
And just lastly, Pastor Burns, you were at the inauguration.
Yes.
Tell us what you thought of that. And also just tell us lastly to conclude as well, how spiritual a man would you describe President Trump as being?
Well, I think that the president is, especially as the second term has come around, the president is very much spiritual. Spiritual is a personal relationship with God. Meaning that he is in tune to the voice of God. He knows that those 2-time assassination attempts was not a coincidence nor an accident, that the hand of God through the Lord Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit guided thwarted those assassination attempts that was designed to kill him in the natural. And as I said to the president, right after that happened, that no weapon formed against you will prosper. Every tongue raised against you, it shall not prevail. And that's what has happened. He's more spiritual. And I think most people would be when you had a near-death experience where you would just sheer millimeters from having the side of your head blown off on national television, very similar to what happened to President Kennedy. And that video would have been played over and over and over again throughout the ages, just like the assassination of JFK that was captured for the whole world to see through the Zapruder film. So the president is very much spiritual. And the inauguration was absolutely beautiful to see so many came out to support the president, to be honored to be asked to be in the Capitol, to watch the swearing-in ceremony, to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have to sit there. And I want to congratulate them for at least doing that. I mean, they, I think, graciously, at least on camera, graciously took their defeat and listened to President Trump simply dismantle their whole 4 years agenda in his speech. And I'm happy he did. To let everybody know that America's back. But the festivities were amazing. I hosted the Multicultural Coalition U.S. Presidential Inaugural Ball, where we brought so many immigrants that you're talking about. So many immigrants from India, from the Native Americans, from Asians, and to the Islanders, to blacks, to whites, to Hispanics, all came together. Hindus, Christians, Muslims, Jews, all came together for my Multicultural Coalition U.S. Presidential Inaugural Ball. It was jam-packed at the Washington Times Arbor Ballroom. And these are people from all over the world, former presidents, current presidents from all over the world came to my ball to celebrate the inauguration of my friend of 10 years, President Donald John Trump. And so these are immigrants, and many of them are, whether they're first generation or second generation. Many are here on visas. They all came. It was the most successful jam-packed inaugural ball the entire night. Many called it the hottest ticket that was in town. As Roger Stone, my friend, said, the hottest ticket in town, because everybody wanted to be there to celebrate. So it wasn't a black ball. It wasn't a white ball. It wasn't a Hispanic ball. It was America's ball, because all races came together to the Multicultural Coalition U.S. Presidential Inaugural Ball that I hosted with John Boyd and so many other great leaders that came together to shout in victory and celebrate my friend Donald John Trump.
All right, well, it sounds like an amazing party. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Pastor Mark Burns. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, let's get another perspective now. We can speak to Duchess Harris, who is a professor of American Studies and Politics at Macalester College, St. Paul. You're also the co-editor of Racially Writing the Republic, Racists, Race Rebels, and Transformations of American Identity. Professor, great to have you with us. Now, I gather you have a connection to Reverend Marianne Edgar Budde, the Bishop of the Diocese of Washington. Just tell us a little bit about what sort of a person she is and how you know her.
Well, good day to you, first of all. And she was the officiant of our wedding in 1994.
Okay, and just tell us a little bit about who she is and what sort of things that are close to her heart.
Sure. At the time, she was the head of St. John's Episcopal Church in Minneapolis. As many people know, she is now a bishop in Washington, D.C. And she has always been someone who has been a proponent for social justice issues. We were drawn to her as an African-American couple because she spoke about racial justice issues in the early 90s. And as we know now, she's been an advocate for queer children, trans children, and for immigrant families who feel threatened that they might be deported.
Okay, and we were just speaking to President Trump's spiritual advisor, Pastor Mark Burns, who was quite scathing of her, called her a so-called bishop, and said that she was peddling a woke agenda which had been flatly rejected in the election by the US people. I mean, how do you respond to that kind of take on her words and her decision to issue that plea for mercy to the president?
I mean, I'm not sure what a woke agenda is. What she called for is mercy. And it seems to me that that fits within the tenets of the Episcopal faith. I think that this would not be an issue if we truly had separation of church and state. But on Inauguration Day, President Trump brought into his speech that he was going to do the work of God.
Okay, and it sounds to me like you've got some doubts.
Well, I mean, this really speaks to, what your beliefs are. And so the thing about it is that as a scholar, I have to say that the United States is not a Christian nation. And so for people to stand on Christianity with their politics, particularly when they hold the highest office in the nation, then all of that needs to be questioned.
But some might say that Bishop Buddy was using the pulpit to challenge an elected official, the elected leader of the country, and that she should have stuck to, her job and not to challenge the president of the country. How do you respond to that sort of narrative?
Well, in African-American tradition, we have something called call and response. And so President Trump called and she responded. And so that is within the purview of the role that she has as a bishop in a church that he has criticized previously.
So she's not going to issue an apology, we understand. I don't know if you've been in contact with Bishop Buddy, but she says she's not going to apologize to President Trump. She's been threatened subsequently as well. I mean, what are you hearing about the circumstances and the nature of these threats?
I think that it speaks to the mindset that we have now that if you disagree with someone philosophically, then you should threaten them with physical harm, which really goes against the notion of democracy and is quite egregious if one is saying that they are a Christian.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like, some Christian communities are quite divided in terms of how they interpret religious texts. I mean, do you think this is part of it?
I think that's a big part of it. I think that Americans are divided on how they interpret the Constitution.
Okay, and do you think Bishop Buddy will ultimately remain in that position as bishop of that church?
I think so. I think so. Like, she's had a career that has lasted for more than 3 decades, and she's been consistent. So I can't imagine that she would change her position now.
I mean, at the core of what she said, I mean, she was really talking about lots of people who might be fearing fear in the United States. And we've been speaking a lot on this program about the issue of migration in the United States. Interestingly, one Republican, Mike Collins of Georgia, suggested that Bishop Buddy be deported. But why is immigration such a hot topic in the United States? I mean, is there really a sense that it's been so mismanaged by the authorities there?
Well, first of all, if we are to deport Bishop Buddy, I hope that New Jersey would welcome her because that is where she is from. And I think that we all understand that immigration is such a hot button issue because it has to do with labor and economics. And as she mentioned in her sermon, what do we do with people that we have asked to come to this country to work in meatpacking, for instance, in a place like Austin, Minnesota, and she lived in Minnesota for 18 years, that we ask them to come here to do the work that citizens do not want to do, and then we want to either return them to their country, or if they have children here, now we want to deny their children birthright citizenship, which is a citizenship that has been allowed for centuries now.
But because immigration was so central to the election campaign, and Donald Trump was voted in by a majority of Americans, I mean, don't people just have to accept that this is the direction America is going to go in for the next 4 years, and that's why he was a large part of why he was voted in, precisely because he made these pledges and he can't walk away from them?
I'm not really sure I understand the question about America accepting his position on immigration. I think most people in the nation and people throughout the world are aware of what his policy positions are. That doesn't mean that people need to accept them or that people should not resist them and that people should not hope for something different 4 years from now.
I mean, it's quite interesting to see that the Pope has said some quite similar things to what Bishop Buddy said. You know, he's been critical of President Trump for not being more welcoming, he said, to immigrants into the United States, calling it un-Christian. I wonder why Bishop Buddy's been singled out and we haven't heard quite so much criticism, or perhaps we have, correct me if I'm wrong, of the Pope.
Well, I don't think that we can discount gender. And so President Trump has a long history of feeling uncomfortable with women who speak their truth. That seems to be inappropriate to him, given what his values are. And so I think that his response to the Pope might be different to Bishop Buddy because Bishop Buddy is a woman.
President Trump has called her a radical left hardline Trump hater. How do you think Bishop Buddy would respond to an accusation of that nature?
I hope she receives it as a compliment.
Is there a sense that perhaps she has an issue with President Trump?
You know, I don't want to speak to that. You know, I'm here in the Twin Cities. I have not gone to her church for a very long time. And so I do not want to speak to what her positions are. But once again, if we're going to ask if the church should speak on electoral politics, that would not be necessary if electoral politics did not lean on the church.
What are your hopes for the next 4 years? How you see the next 4 years, the second Trump term unfolding?
I hope for the next 4 years that people who are antithetical to his positions are resilient, and I hope that they organize, and I hope that they prevail.
Okay, and for people who said that the tone of Bishop Buddy was confrontational, disrespectful, she could have phrased things differently. Do you think she could have perhaps modified the message, perhaps just a little bit, used slightly different language with hindsight?
I'm not sure why she would choose to do that. And for people who say that, I think there's the whole notion of pot and kettle.
All right, we're going to leave it there. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. We're out of time now. Duchess Harris, thank you very much indeed for your time.
It was a pleasure.
Now, despite having previously praised President Vladimir Putin and calling him smart, the US President Donald Trump recently took to social media, threatening the Russian president to end what he called the ridiculous war in Ukraine or face new sanctions. Well, President Trump also argued that pushing for peace would be a very big favor to Russia, given its economy is struggling. Well, in response, the Kremlin said it is open to, quote, respectful dialogue. Well, President Putin had earlier stated that he was ready to negotiate, but with one condition: Ukraine must accept Russia's territorial gains, which currently amount to about 20% of its land. Well, for more, we can speak now to Jim Townsend, former Deputy Secretary of Defence for Europe and NATO under President Obama. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Just first of all, love to get your take on how you think the first few days of the second Trump presidency have been viewed by the rest of the world. What sort of a message is Washington sending out, in particular to its allies?
Well, I think the past couple of days in Washington have been absolutely stunning when it comes to domestic things. There's not been a lot of foreign policy except for talking about Panama and Greenland and Canada, as you know. But other than that, he's also talked about Russia. But really, Washington has been turned on its head when it comes to a lot of the edicts that he signed out dealing with the federal workforce, dealing with the so-called DEI, which is the equity, equality, and hiring and this type of thing. It's just been absolutely unprecedented in terms of that. But for how that's being looked on around the world, I think they are seeing these kinds of domestic, very sharp domestic issues being dealt with through these memos that he has sent out, including the southern border. And I think they're wondering probably what's going to come next, whether it's dealing with NATO or dealing with something in the Indo-Pacific. I'm sure the Chinese and the Russians are watching this very carefully as well to see if that gives them any hints on how Trump might deal with those bilateral relations. But it's been a crazy 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, America's allies don't have too much longer to wait because there is, of course, the Munich Security Conference coming up. And you've written an article about it explaining that it's actually a very significant opportunity for the president and for America's allies. Why is that?
Well, the Munich Security Conference is the Davos, if you will, of foreign policy globally. It's like the Oscars, if you will, in the United States. And so it is a room full of those who make big decisions, not just in Europe, but globally. Heads of state, all the most senior ministers are there, military authorities. So my suggestion was that the administration, if it really wants to get its grievances out, to really send a message to the rest of the world, you can do it at the Munich Security Conference just a few weeks after the inauguration. It's going to be in February. And then there's a NATO summit in June where those things that he might say about Europe and about the alliance, that gives the alliance time to take into account what he is saying, what his grievances are. And the alliance can work on things that could be maybe approved in June at the summit that might address some of his concerns. So the Munich Security Conference is a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, so basically we've got Munich in February, 4 months after that, the NATO summit. And I just want to ask you whether you see NATO changing significantly during the second term of President Trump, because in the first term, it was in for a few shocks, wasn't it?
Well, I think in the first term, the allies had to get used to being spoken to the way Trump speaks to them. In the past, of course, U.S. presidents have been very diplomatic and politicians as well. And so they were easier to get along with. Trump's a very different person, very different personality, has some grievances about Europe. And so he was very direct. And they had to get used to dealing with that, as well as his tactics of threatening to withdraw from NATO and that type of thing. This second term, I think everyone is used to that, but still, Trump is unpredictable, so they're nervous about that. But I think they know a bit better now how to work with someone who comes at them from such a different angle. And of course, the main point that Trump makes is Europe's got to do more, got to spend more on their own defense. So that will be a message that's familiar. But with Putin on the march, there's an added a need to be quick about it. And so you'll hear that from Trump as well.
I mean, with hindsight, was President Trump good for NATO in the first term?
Well, I think you can make a case that he was, with a lot of hindsight. I wouldn't have said that at the time, but I think it helped prepare the allies to make the tough decisions about how to deal with Putin, spending more money, deploying forces, increasing the militaries, that kind of thing. I think Trump came in and gave it a real shove. In the past number of years, the alliance wasn't moving as quickly, or allies weren't moving as quickly as the alliance wanted them to move in terms of dealing with Putin and dealing with what's happening in Ukraine. When Trump came in, he gave everyone a real shove, not because of Putin, but he gave them a shove because he felt we were being taken advantage of. So the message was not exactly the message that everyone appreciated, but I think the shove was kind of needed. And a lot of the progress made by NATO since then could be linked to not just Putin, but also to Trump.
Now, we've heard Donald Trump this week calling Russia's war in Ukraine a ridiculous war. He did say he could end that war, didn't he, with a single telephone call some months ago. That doesn't seem to have happened. We've also just heard from Moscow in the last few hours saying it's waiting for signals from the United States and calling for respectful dialogue. Is there a sense that they think the United States is being disrespectful here?
Well, I think Putin has always felt that he was being treated poorly by the West, that he considered Russia a superpower still, even though the Cold War and the Soviet Union had gone away, and that he should be treated as an equal to the United States. That helped to really ruin the relationship with NATO, where he felt that he was being treated just like any other non-NATO nation. And so I noticed that as well in his statement. He still wants this respect and not to be dismissed or seen as weak. He wants to be seen as strong. He wants to be feared. So that's what he is saying. The signals he's looking for initially are a signal to have a meeting, whether it's in a neutral area or a visit by one or the other. And to him, that shows respect. To him, that shows that he's being treated as someone important. And so he wants that meeting just for the meeting's sake, quite frankly. What they talk about, of course, will not just be Ukraine, but Russia's grievances with the West and with Europe, and why he's in Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. So we're beginning to see this posturing by the U.S. and by Russia. They're posturing, they're sending signals back and forth before they feel ready to sit down and talk.
I mean, it looks like we could be looking at the dawn of a pretty turbulent chapter in relations between the United States and a number of allies, especially in Europe, especially when it comes to trade. And I'm just wondering whether, given some of the global threats out there and threats that are common to the United States and its allies, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, doesn't the West need to look more united at this particular point?
Well, that unity is so important, and that unity is what will help make Putin go to a negotiating table. Right now, he feels that there is disunity with NATO. He feels that the U.S. is getting wobbly and might go in a whole different direction. So that emboldens him not to negotiate anything. He feels he's doing well. And what will make him sit down at the table and negotiate in earnest will be a feeling that maybe the West is more unified than he thought. Maybe the U.S. is actually going to be potentially helping Ukraine and not walking away. And that we're all in this for the long term. That's what will help to drive Putin to the table. Right now, like you point out, there could be some questions about unity driven by a lot of what Trump has said about NATO or about allies. And so if we can somehow portray a more unified West, including the United States, that's what will help to get Putin to the negotiating table.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Jim Townsend, thanks again.
You're very welcome.
And finally, California is continuing to battle devastating wildfires with a new blaze breaking out north of Los Angeles on Wednesday morning. Well, dubbed the Hughes Fire, it's so far forced more than 30,000 people to evacuate, with another 23,000 under evacuation warnings. Within hours, the fire had spread across more than 41 square kilometers, and according to local authorities, it is still only 14% contained. Well, Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, goodbye.
We go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining me. I want to kick off by giving you the chance to tell me about the World Economic Forum. What are the opportunities there for Saudi Arabia?
Absolutely. So the kingdom's is prioritizing engaging with the global community to foster more global dialogue. We realize that with time, with Vision 2030, we've become a more integrated member of the global economy. And as such, we have an opportunity to be a stronger force for good to shape a more prosperous future. So we'll continuously engage in Davos, in the World Economic Forum, in all multilateral venues and all opportunities to work with our partners, to share our transformation, what we're learning from it, to learn from other opportunities and experiences, but also to work together seriously on addressing some of the global challenges that we see today.
The power of economic diplomacy. In your mind, what are the opportunities for foreign direct investment? Because that's a pillar of Vision 2030.
So under Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia has become a global investment powerhouse. We are leveraging our diplomatic determination, our economic potential, our resources. A lot of countries are known for strengths. Some are known for strengths in natural resources, others in human resources. With time, the kingdom is becoming strong in both. But also the growing growth platform that Vision 2030 has built in the kingdom in order to fire up new engines of growth, new sectors, reinvigorate old sectors, and attract quality capital that wants to really grow, not just in terms of size, but also impact to the kingdom. No country on earth today is witnessing the vast opportunities that are being created in the kingdom. And they're not being created because we want to increase FDI. They're being created because we are on a serious mission to restructure our economy and unlock the human potential of people in Saudi Arabia.
Is Donald Trump good for the Saudi economy?
So we've always maintained a very strong relationship with the U.S. It's a long-standing partnership that lasted until today 8 decades. It's always been strong, no matter which administration is in office. We look forward to working with the second Trump administration, as we have worked with previous administrations, to address and counter some of the global challenges we're facing, including the tepid economic growth that we're witnessing as a global community today.
How concerned are you by the Trump administration's rhetoric when it comes to China?
Saudi Arabia, as I mentioned, the important thing to focus on is that we've always played a meaningful, constructive role with all our partners. We are steadfast in investing and fostering global dialogue. One of the things that makes Saudi Arabia unique as a long-term, reliable partner is how much we value constructive partnerships across the board. We have a very strong relationship with the U.S. and a very strong relationship with China, and many strong relationships with many countries. And this has become even more clear after the launch of Vision 2030, after we started looking inwards and understanding what we need as an economy and society and know what we can offer to our partners, which has led to strong collaboration and growing strength in our partnerships, which we will continue to build on. That's one of the things the kingdom is known for and will continue to be known for.
So you're not worried about a Trump presidency and the impact it'll have on the Saudi economy?
We will continue to work with our partners with our partners in the U.S. and other countries to make sure that our transformation is yielding the results we are aspiring to achieve, but also is offering the opportunities that could be attractive for a lot of countries and a lot of private enterprises and entrepreneurs and innovators and even academic institutions and think tanks from around the world. And we think that back and forth will always be front and center and will showcase the value of this partnership.
How concerned are you about oil price today and that trajectory? Because obviously that still has a great deal to do with your ability to reach those 2030 goals.
So if we take a step back, the important thing we're focusing on is unlocking the full potential of our economy and society. And we believe, to simplify, there's two ways to achieve that together. One is finally detaching our economic activity from having to rely on the price of a single commodity. In parallel, unlocking the full potential of people in the kingdom to have a human-centric growth story. With time, that shift, that economic structure, will rely on all the resources that we have. And we talked about natural resources and the inflow that comes with it, but also more today than ever before, human resources and the potential that they're offering in the kingdom. So our approach to oil markets is about long-term stability. That's been our message, long-term market stability. We need to make sure that there is enough quality and clear supply and clarity of that supply that's meeting the growing demand, growing for many reasons, even if you only look at the impact of generative AI and the impact of that on the global demand trajectory for energy. And that's what we will solve for as part of a larger group, OPEC+. As far as our reliance on oil, we'll continue working with our transformation towards relying less. Today, non-oil revenues represent a larger portion of our total revenue profile, and that will continue without adding more burden to the private sector, but by growing our non-oil economy. And we've instituted other tools that make us rely less with time on oil revenues, including we have institutions today, such as Sovereign Wealth Fund, the National Development Fund, that are supporting the private sector, crowding in private investment, growing new sectors, and so much more, that have their own budgets and their own long-term strategies, and that are delivering on them. More importantly, we want to make the shift to create more dynamism in the private sector so the private sector can truly lead the economic growth story in the kingdom. That takes time. We used to rely heavily on oil flows. Today we rely much less. In the future, we want to detach our economic growth activity and trajectory from having to rely on oil revenue completely, while still maintaining a global leadership role in the world of not just clean hydrocarbon energy, which is something we've demonstrated, but also more so renewable energy, transition solutions, climate tech, and so on.
You do rely on them a lot less, but you still rely on them. How worrying is U.S. energy dominance?
So as far as our role in the energy markets, our focus is on making sure there's enough energy supply, because we realize that energy security is imperative for global growth and global prosperity. So we'll continue playing that role. We'll continue assessing whatever could impact the markets of oil and what we need to do as a country, but also as a member of OPEC+, to address whatever needs to be addressed to make sure that there's long-term supply.
Tell me this, when you take a step back and look at what's been achieved in the last several years towards the goals of Vision 2030, where is Saudi Arabia still falling short? Is it in terms of employing women?
If you look at Vision 2030 closely, you'll see that we're on track and we're gaining momentum. This is the 8th year, and the momentum is as strong, if not stronger, as when this was launched. And there is progress areas on all fronts. In the first wave of impact, the drive was coming mainly from political will and the right, bold decisions. That was complemented with investments, new regulations, new strategies to unlock the potential of old sectors, but also to start new sectors. And we're seeing the impact of that today, but we're just in the beginning. I'll take tourism just as an example. The decision to start the tourism sector, obviously we started the tourism sector and the tourism sector, the sectors associated to tourism, culture, sports, entertainment, for many reasons. One, we believe this is an economic birthright of the Saudi economy and society. Imagine any Western economy, as an example, without these sectors. It's very hard to imagine. Two, they serve as a soft infrastructure that can make the kingdom more relatable, more accessible, more open, that can help us attract not just more capital, more operations, but attract minds, entrepreneurs, innovators, thinkers, to come and base in Saudi Arabia and grow, whether they want to grow their investments, their knowledge, their households, their families, whatever it is. We want them to view the kingdom as a place of growth. But that decision was taken a few years ago. In 2019, we managed to increase the level of inbound travel to the point where it went above our level of outbound travel for the first time in history. That was just before COVID. Right after COVID, I believe last year, inbound, or this year actually, inbound travel compared to outbound travel also is at a higher level by even a larger margin. Both increased. People are spending more, but people coming into the kingdom, our exported services in tourism have increased dramatically. Spend in tourism increased 40% over our numbers in 2022. Our GDP numbers in Q2 and Q3 wouldn't have been this strong if it weren't for that decision to start these new sectors. That's one example. Another example, more on the human capital side. We're seeing more entrepreneurs, even Saudi entrepreneurs, coming back to the kingdom, rebasing in the kingdom, in the region or from outside of the region, who want to start opportunities here. Saudi students who used to jump at the opportunity to learn abroad, which we believe is a great thing, to learn wherever you can get the best knowledge and education.
But bring it home.
And bring it home, or continue being leaders in other economies. That's fine. I think it's a personal choice. But remain connected, I think, to the country, of course. But with time, we're seeing people hesitant to leave the country. They want to study where they can apply their knowledge on the job training in the opportunities that are being created in the kingdom.
They want to be a part of the future.
And part of the action that's happening on the ground today. And that's just another example. And there are many examples to demonstrate the progress. Is the job done? Not yet. The mission is not accomplished. We are looking at our success and our progress with pride. We're not over-celebrating. We know the job is still in the middle of the journey, and there's a lot more serious work to be done.
Talk to me about the investments in artificial intelligence. How will AI fundamentally change Saudi's economy?
So the kingdom is focusing on addressing and steering disruptive innovations. We believe in investing in digital capabilities. In the past, we've invested in digital infrastructure that led to the growth today, especially in the startup scene of fintech and e-commerce. Some of the largest startups in the region in fintech are Saudi-based, and the growth numbers are huge. Venture capital in 2023, MENA-wide, was led by the kingdom, and it was mainly driven by these two areas. The first international venture capital deals were drawn into, and the big brand names that were drawn into e-commerce and fintech, and we're very proud of that. And we believe there more innovation will come from that. So that will continue. We believe in innovation and its impact on unlocking economic potential locally and globally. As far as artificial intelligence, we believe the kingdom will be a leader in this field in the future. We're trying to focus on three themes. One is investing for strategic and financial returns, so making the right investments, and that has begun already. Two, being a larger part of the global value chain in generative AI, and the kingdom has a lot to offer in that area, whether it's
What does
land.
that look like?
So there's a lot to offer in terms of the land that's available.
For data centers.
The energy for data centers, and additional services around it as well. The access to renewable energy. Sometimes it's hard to export green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, but it's probably easier to bring the energy closer or bring the facilities closer to where the energy is. So we can export compute rather than exporting energy specifically. And the regulatory environment. The kingdom has a competitive, agile regulatory environment that can compete with most environments. But more importantly, the third theme is for the kingdom's public sector and the private sector to be super or power users of the value that comes from generative AI. Generative AI is best utilized in terms of value the closer it is to use cases. And the kingdom has many sectors where we've accumulated so much knowledge and data over decades that can, matched with AI, can be a source for our global either performance or global export potential. I'll name three of them, or two of them. One is energy. We've accumulated a lot of knowledge in energy. We've become leaders in clean hydrocarbon energy, and we will continue to invest in it so that we are leaders in not just renewable energy, green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization, sequestration, but other technologies and solutions needed for a just and orderly and a pragmatic energy transition. Number two is healthcare. We've invested so much in healthcare. We've spent so much in healthcare over decades. We've accumulated so much knowledge. Most of our trainees are relied upon in international healthcare systems. The people who train in the kingdom and then go to other countries are some of the best in their fields. Some of the first surgeries that were done using robotics have been done by Saudi teams in Saudi Arabia. And we're only getting started if we focus more. One of our private sector healthcare providers has recently signed with an international Ministry of Health to export their hospital information systems, Habib Healthcare. And that's a prime example of how a technology programmed by Saudis in the 90s today became a superior tool in the world of healthcare. Match that with the power of AI and the use cases that can come from healthcare and the need for treatment and screening and longevity and life extension, the potential is immense.
Talk to me a bit about the minerals sector beyond oil. When we talk about how Saudi Arabia could potentially become a conduit between East and West in the search for rare earth minerals, His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz, the Minister of Energy recently announcing that Saudi Arabia would enrich uranium for export. That will raise a lot of eyebrows. How does that factor in to the health of the Saudi economy?
So if we go back to what we said with regards to unlocking the potential of the kingdom's economy, we talked about planning, the importance of planning with confidence, delivering with optimism, and we believe optimism is a strategic choice. Optimism is not just a gut reaction or an emotion. It is a choice. By design, you want to be optimistic. More importantly, managing with prudence. You'll see that our focus is on firing up new sectors, new engines of growth, reinvigorating other ones. The kingdom has been sitting on a lot of mineral reserves. Today, what's being witnessed today, especially these few days in the Future of Minerals Forum, in terms of advancements in the mining sector, are happening at a pace faster in the last few years than they did in the decades before that. The kingdom wants to be a leader in not just innovation, but also in being an integral part of the global value chain, not just investing locally, but investing globally, and being a leader in the thought process and the progress of the thinking around the mining sector and where it's going, for many reasons. We want to avail material here that can make our industrial complex more attractive and attract more industry to be based in the kingdom. But also we want to make sure that we have access to the critical materials for our current industries and to remain competitive. And that's part of our ambition to become, which we're very much focused on, a global industrial and logistics platform. At the heart of everything, we want to be able to diversify our source of growth by allowing and pushing the private sector to be able to export more products that are more complex, that have a higher value add in the kingdom, competitively into external markets. And mining plays a big role in that approach.
And you're not worried about the geopolitical implications of that?
Well, if we're going to continue to foster global dialogue, and we'll continue relying on dialogue and common ground and collaboration, we believe that any challenges that we might face can be addressed in that regard. Ultimately, we want to be a constructive force of good for the advancement and unlocking of the potential of many sectors, including this one.
Tell me this. Saudi Arabia, obviously the biggest economy in the region, when you speak to, as I do, leaders from surrounding nations, they say when Saudi Arabia is doing good, we are all doing good. How does the health of the Saudi economy, in your mind, play into regional stability?
So our drive to shape a more prosperous future comes from this. The kingdom has always played a leadership role globally and a leadership role in the region. It's always been a force for more stability and more peace and more security in the region and globally. Today we're more integrated, and we realize that any success we may have will have a serious and direct impact on the region, but also on the globe, and vice versa. Any changes that happen to the global economy or the regional environment could have an impact on our plans and ambitions. So we're dealing with this on two tracks. One where we directly engage with global partners to make sure that, as far as the region goes, we lay a clear and irreversible path towards more security, more peace, and ultimately more prosperity, but also across from the region, or let's say outside of the region, play a meaningful role in addressing global challenges, economic, geopolitical alike. We've seen that when the kingdom led the G20, during the G20 presidency. We've seen that today as the kingdom, through the Minister of Finance, heads the IMFC, all focusing the committee for status on the Committee on the Status of Women and many other venues where the kingdom is being relied on to address and lead in addressing some of the global challenges. Indirectly, but closer to home, the success of Vision 2030, the success of this long-term transformation, is important for unlocking the potential of the kingdom as an economy and a society, but also because a stronger Saudi will lead to a stronger Middle East, and we believe a stable Middle East is imperative for global growth and global prosperity.
And finally, Your Excellency, when you think about this with regards to the broader themes of the World Economic Forum, a lot of conversation surrounding China, a lot of conversation surrounding interest rates, the amount of capital at large today, and how investors can find returns. What does all of that mean for Saudi Arabia, in that you've got a lot more to do before 2030, you are on track, as you say. What headwinds do you anticipate?
If you take a step back, we like to look at the world, or like to look at things in two lenses. One is more data-driven, evidence-driven, telling us where we are today and why. And the other is about future prospects, future potential, and what we need to do today to unlock the potential of the youth and future generations. Under the first lens, if you look closer, you'll see that the world is going in two directions. One that is settled into this economic stalemate. We have growth between 2.7 and 3.2 expected, projected, but it's tepid growth, as some of the experts call it. And two, and sometimes the same people who are commenting on this tepid growth, including us, we're talking about the potential of technological disruption, the potential for bold leadership to change the world, to address creating new opportunities for growth, AI's impact, etc. But it's continuously two modes. If we kind of focus on the second lens and say, what do we need to do today, we'll realize that we need to really embrace innovation. We need to embrace addressing the challenges of the global south. We need to address having more opportunities for intrepid leadership to get us out of the tepid growth profile we are having today. We need to create new sectors, reinvigorate old ones, and that will get us out of where we are. And if you look closely at Vision 2030 and the Saudi story, you'll see it as an evidence point of a country with intrepid leadership that has decided, at that time, even remember how things were not as, I'd say, positive as an environment as they are today. There was a lot of headwinds there, even more in some cases, that decided to be optimistic, decided to put in the work to live up to that optimism and unlock its potential of its economy and society, and play an even more constructive, more active role in the global community to address some of its challenges. I think that's important. We will continue to be steadfast in playing the role that we always want to play, which is a role of a long-term reliable partner that is adamant to shape a more prosperous future.
And so 2025 will be a good year for Saudi Arabia in terms of the numbers?
Our projections for 2025 is that obviously this momentum is still continuing. Our non-oil growth in 2024 was 3.9%. Our non-oil growth for 2025, we project it to be 4.8%, and 2026, 6.2%. What's important is not just what we achieve in 2025, it's also what we're laying the ground for in terms of achieving in the long term. This is a long-term marathon that we're very serious about, and we have the agility to run sprints here and there to make sure we capture the opportunities as they arise.
Your Excellency, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Adley.
At Arabiya News, we go beyond the headlines.
From the latest breaking news to in-depth coverage of global events.
We're not bought or sold. Nobody owns us.
The loss of life, the destruction of property. The conflicts are such a terrible thing.
Context and analysis to help you see the full picture.
The world is in a very dangerous place.
Join us on Arabiya News,
It's very impressive.
where knowledge meets perspective.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deep fake and artificial intelligence,
They've got to have a vote and a say.
it's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers,